you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you come back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be, I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. There's rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love, because you're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Take a one-way ride, steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear for a night, just to give in to the need and leave it all behind. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker, you're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette, 'cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
Good morning, folks, and welcome to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I'm your host, Rich Baris, and it is Friday, Freewheeling Friday. But we're going to do something a little bit different today. I'm going to have two guests on, and then we'll do the Q&A at the end, all right? But before I bring on our first guest, the ratings are in. Look, it's notable. 12 million views for the president's joint session of Congress. That's about a quarter of what Trump and Obama both got. And it was significantly about 20% more partisan than the average in recent presidential speeches, which, again, is notable. So for Trump and Obama, usually around 40 million viewers for a high-end speech, one of their bigger speeches. And then they get a partisan lean. Obama, his last one was D plus 12 with CBS News. And Trump's was R plus 16. You're looking at, the CBS News. That's pretty significant. And this time around, it was 20 points more. So it was 36% of the viewers more Democratic than the viewers traditionally. That's a lot. That's a lot. So it's an echo chamber is really what it is. I don't know if that says more about CBS, says more about our modern environment, political environment, or says more about coverage, in general, But in any event, I want to bring in my first guest. He's the executive director of Look Ahead America. He's been doing a lot of things that we've talked about here, and just wanted to bring him on. I'm happy to have him because let him tell you himself what he's up to, what he's found. We'll ask him about some of the stuff and what he's been up to now. Matt Braynard, welcome to Inside the Numbers, and thank you for joining us. How you doing? First, Matt, I guess tell everybody, I get a lot of questions about what you guys are doing over there. So out of your mouth, so what did you start this organization to do? What have you been up to?
I hear you, not him.
Can you just hang on 1 second, Matt? You're going in and out. Everything was right before, but you're going in and out a little bit. I don't know if it's fading.
Ask him if he hit the mute button on his end.
No, it's not the mute. Yeah, that helps. You want to take it from the start and see if it works?
Such individuals who are just not engaged with our political process, whom our politicians and political leaders are ignoring, and who, if they made their voices heard, would be determinative in almost any election. So our goal in getting them engaged has been first and foremost. However, we've had a lot of difficulty doing that because we've been primarily just a volunteer operation for the last 4 years. Then enter the 2020 general election. In the aftermath of that, I had some ideas that might detect illegal ballots or problems with the elections. And I floated them initially to a couple of different people within the campaign and with the RNC, and it didn't really go anywhere. So I tweeted them out, and that sort of caught fire. And within a short period of time, we'd raised something like $600,000 to $700,000 to conduct our investigation into illegal ballots across 6 different states. And we found some very disturbing things. A lot of our work ended up being parts of the lawsuits filed by the president's campaign team and by other allied groups. Our data never really got to stay in court, though, unfortunately, because of the difficulty in winning over judges who didn't think we had standing, or because in Georgia's case, the president conceded before we actually got to trial. However, we've continued to do our investigations of these states. We just recently released our Georgia report, which identified a greater number of illegal ballots than the margin of victory. We'll be releasing reports in Wisconsin and Arizona that show much the same thing, as well as potentially Pennsylvania. While other folks have been focusing on like the counting side of potential problems with the election, we focus exclusively on the casting side, people who should not have been casting ballots, who had ballots cast their name, who never should have been able to cast those ballots. So we've identified
your mic glitched.
delegitimizing the president.
Your mic glitched a little bit in the end there, but it did what it did before. But that what you said while you figure that out, I mean, what you said is really it's important. So we didn't do widespread Wisconsin. We looked at Michigan, we looked at Georgia, we looked at Arizona, and we found some of what you're talking about here. But what you just said is just really important, because Georgia, we're talking about a very small margin, man. Some of these other, and Wisconsin is what I got an email over and what a lot of people want me to ask you about. I know you don't have the report out yet, but we have to explain. I have a savvy audience, but we have to explain first what indefinitely confined means and what is typical in an election cycle for the state of Wisconsin in particular. And why this time it was different and would raise anybody's eyebrow if you have been following it for as long as people like us have. Now, signature verification, we've talked about this ad nauseum. Explain to people what the difference is between indefinitely confined, claiming that, and able to cast an absentee ballot.
So several years ago, when Scott Walker and Republicans dominated the legislature in Wisconsin, they made it very difficult to cast ballots without ID. They closed a lot of loopholes, but they did leave one open, which was for the indefinitely confined. So these are people who are near death in nursing homes. I think the rule that we used within our group to determine whether or not somebody was indefinitely confined is that, do they need an ambulance to leave the house? That was basically the standard that we used. And for those people, the state government said, look, they don't have to show an ID, okay? And historically, you've had as few as a couple hundred people claim this status for the first time in an election. Sometimes a little over 1,000, but really not that many. In the 2020 general election, there were over 160,000 who claimed indefinitely confined status and were able to vote without an ID. And to be clear, COVID was not an excuse to claim indefinitely confined status. That decision was made loud and clear by the courts and by the state. And what we found is that among the people who have claimed the status, because there's no check, the state doesn't check, it's sort of an honor system. But what we found so far in our research is that when we started, basically pouring through social media, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, along with other publicly available records, we were finding that about 97% of the people who claimed this status, or the people who claimed it in their names, did so illegitimately. And I think the most famous case, we identified a Democrat state legislator whose wife claimed this status while she was cruising around on a speedboat, clearly not indefinitely confined. Now, the case, you could say in her case, well, I mean, she did claim it, she did vote illegally, but she could have voted ordinarily, right? Just through by showing ID, et cetera. And surely she has ID. And that's a fair point. But what it illustrates, though, is that when you don't have to show an ID to cast a ballot, we don't know who actually cast the ballot. And that's where the problem lies.
Yeah, and I think, too, you said it with the honor system. So some of the stuff that we saw in Michigan and in Georgia, it really rely on not just the voter being, adhering to an honor system, but officials adhering to it. So I think I've heard you talk about this before, and when we were in Tampa, we did discuss this a little bit. This is the problem I have overall, though, Matt, with signature verification. In the end, and as was the case in Michigan, you really have to rely on the individuals to properly check those signatures, right? So I don't know how your experience has been. Maybe you could talk about that a little bit, but ours has not been good as far as getting compliance from officials. And then we did see that court case in Michigan, but generally what we were arguing was that this time around, Jocelyn Benson, the Secretary of State, clearly made it easier for officials to say, okay, this signature matched. When before there had to be a more strict standard. You did not give the signer the benefit of the doubt. So it's almost like we have to take all of this discretion out of the hands of human beings, Matt, and put them in the hands of something like, we put our fingerprint on an iPhone to be able to open an iPhone. Why can't we put our fingerprint on a screen to be able to verify it's our ballot?
That's an interesting point that you raise. And again, it's one that Look Ahead America has solved. We put forward our policy objectives, 6 of them, to restore voter integrity. And, we don't just do voter integrity research. We actually have an army of volunteers across the country, all of them organized under state coordinators, and they're all leading the fight for voter integrity across the country. And one of our policy proposals is to require a thumbprint on an absentee ballot affidavit envelope, which removes a lot of problems. First and foremost, it gets rid of the signature verification problem because it's easily scannable and it can be easily matched. It removes issues with people casting ballots that don't belong to them, with people casting multiple ballots. And it also eliminates the problems with ballot harvesting. I mean, ballot harvesting is a problem for other reasons, but you at least know that the person who was supposed to cast that ballot did so. And what's interesting to me is that so far we've actually seen our policy objectives show up both in law and in proposed law across the country. One of our 6 proposals actually made it into the Georgia legislation. I'm very proud of that. And it passed, and it's now law of the land in Georgia. I've seen our fingerprint requirement introduced and co-sponsored with about 6 people in Texas. So Texas has taken the lead on requiring fingerprints on the affidavit envelope of absentee ballots. So when we've got this many people within our organization, volunteer-wise, who are raising these issues, all of them are reaching out to their state legislators and sharing our 6 policy objectives. We're actually starting to penetrate, and this is just the beginning. I'm very optimistic about. Obviously, I don't think we can do too much about what happened in November 2020, but moving forward, I think it shows a lot of promise.
That's going to make a lot of people happy to hear. I mean, it does. There's a lot of people look around and they feel very disenfranchised and they get down, and that's promising news. In Florida, this was bipartisan years ago. It pains me a little bit because we had the hanging Chad nonsense, and it seemed like both parties really just didn't want to be embarrassed anymore, and we're much more open. We live in a different time now, so anytime you come up with, even if you think it's common sense, we pull this stuff all the time, Matt. The support for signature verification, for even deadlines for counties and officials to report their totals, not results. Americans widely support this stuff, and yet it seems like it has to be partisan, and that's a shame. But it's tough when you're doing work and you're trying to be thorough. You have one side, obviously, that wants you to be done tomorrow. You said, I agree 100%. There's really, what can you do about 2020? It's done. It's behind us. People have to look forward, which is
or look ahead.
look ahead, right? The same way, the same exact language. I mean, that really is what it comes down to. When you were doing your work, how was it? A lot of this stuff, a lot of the information we access is publicly available, but if you wanted to go to a clerk's office, for instance, and you wanted somebody's absentee ballot application, they're supposed to keep these on file for years in certain states. We had a tremendously difficult time getting compliance from anybody. Did you run into that, or did most of the stuff you do was really publicly available anyway?
Well, most of the data that we used for the Voter Integrity Project came from either the state directly, the voter lists, and the records of who cast ballots and what the methods were and what dates they were received and sent out. We were able to obtain that, and then we held it up against other government databases like National Change of Address. However, we didn't actually get everything that we really needed. And the reality is that in states like Georgia or Wisconsin or Arizona, the state is actually in a much better position to do this type of investigation than we are as outsiders. So for example, one of our major challenges was the fact that many states weren't releasing complete dates of birth. And by not having somebody's complete date of birth, it makes it much more difficult to establish that they didn't have residency or that they had moved to another state and established residency there or registered to vote in another state, which invalidates your initial registration. So the lack of complete information that we were getting from the states, and in Arizona's case was particularly bad. Only Maricopa made its voter data available to us in a way that we could see who cast ballots in the 2020 general election. All of those other counties,
Incredible,
for about a third of the vote. It takes them months typically to release their vote history, and we had basically weeks and days to make our case. So it was entirely off limits to us. Fortunately, now we are able to go back, and we are doing basically our housekeeping reports, which we just released on Georgia, which we'll be releasing on Wisconsin and Arizona with a more complete data set, actually in Pennsylvania too, which has a very unique problem. But we couldn't do them in the moment. And all of these, and one of our policy proposals actually tackles this in two ways. Number one is that we require a state to create a division within the Attorney General's office whose sole job it is to investigate and prosecute voter fraud. And the second of our policy proposals is that there will be created a citizens committee at the state level, and everybody on that citizens committee will have the same authority to look at anything, to go anywhere, to have access to everything that the state elections director and any county elections director has, along with a police escort to make sure they get into where they need to go and see what they need to see. The hope being that you may not trust the Secretary of State or the state elections director or the county elections director, but at least one of these people on the Citizens Commission, which will be bipartisan and nonpartisan, at least there will be one person there whom you trust. And if they say that, look, we lost this one fair and square, there wasn't any funny business, you at least have faith that the system worked the way it needed to.
Yeah, I think enforcement is key. I'm loving that idea, because a lot of people tell me, well, once the law gets on the books, what difference does it make if it's not enforced? If they have escorts, that really does change the game. I don't understand why there's so much pushback against reviews like this in any kind. I mean, it's a democracy, and you have to feel that the result is credible to be able to move on as a nation or as a state, whatever it may be. I just don't understand the pushback there. If you want to govern with a mandate, you were elected and that's it, then you would seem to want everyone to feel that your election was legitimate. And it's a shame that there's just pushback to that.
Actually, the reason for their pushback has become clear to me. And this is, I do my speeches, all over the country where I talk about the three problems with voter fraud. The first is that it happens. But the reality is that that's probably the least impactful of the three. The second is that it demoralizes voters who believe that they were defrauded. And you say, well, why is there pushback into this? Or the truth is that the idea of voter fraud helps the left. The idea of it, apart from whether it itself actually helps the left, it helps them because we get so many of our folks who share our worldview, who share our politics, who look at the last election and say, oh, I'm never going to vote again. There's no point. And 100%. This makes it easier for the left and progressive voters to win. So that's why it's incumbent on people like yourself and like me and my organization to restore the confidence of the system so that people do say, okay, I guess it will be fair this time. I'm not certain, but Matt Braynard and Richard says at least these changes, these reforms have been made. And I know Matt Braynard's group has in my state helped sanitize the voter list to remove all of the illegal voters who don't belong there. And I know that Look Ahead America on election day is going to turn into the nation's largest poll watching, election monitoring operation the country has ever seen. And that if they'll have eyes and ears anywhere, and if there's something wrong happening, that they'll catch it. So that's really what LA is about. It's not just identifying and suggesting remedies for the ways that voter fraud happens, but restoring that confidence so that our voters have confidence in returning to the polls. Because if they don't, then we're in really big problem. We're in tremendous problems.
Well said, 100% true. Georgia, we polled that 3 times, the runoff leading up to January 5th. Democrats didn't win those races. Republicans lost them. There were just so many people saying, well, my vote won't count. They're just going to take it from me anyway. So I mean, I couldn't believe. It was really clear in the areas where Republicans needed turnout, it was disproportionate, and those people were telling. It wasn't a matter of preference. Highly Republican areas, breaking almost evenly. That wasn't a matter of vote preference. That was a matter of who told us they were going to vote in those areas, and it was very clear. They felt like they were disenfranchised and that it didn't matter anymore. And we tried to tell people at the time, this is not helpful. So telling people that their vote doesn't matter is you're making the situation much worse, and that's just how it played out. But you said something before too. Those matches with the address, the records, I call them dirty rolls, right? So people, they get but it's true. And you've seen this. The only way to properly match a change of address, you need in our system, it's a 5-level match. So you're a level 1 if your first name, your last name, your middle name matches along with your date of birth and your street address. You're a level 2 if maybe you have a middle initial instead of a full middle name. You're a level 3 if you're missing a middle initial. But this is the way our roles are maintained, unfortunately, and it makes this work much more difficult. And it makes not just what you do, but even as a pollster, when you're trying to figure out who is going to vote, who is not. Did somebody legitimately pick up the phone and tell you have to? And this is what you did, right? So to verify whether somebody voted, in many cases you picked up the phone and called the number on the record.
Well, we also, we did our own phone matches to enhance it, because as a campaign operative, I can tell you that the raw voter files from the state are in the state that they're in is pretty much useless. So we have to go through a lot of commercial enhancements. But yeah, we spent a lot of money dialing folks and asking, hey, did you actually cast that ballot? Did you request your absentee ballot? Did you send that absentee ballot back? And interestingly enough, in Arizona, we were finding people that told us that, no, I definitely didn't vote. I haven't been in the state in years. I'm going to college somewhere else, like in Tennessee. And yet the state, and we knew we were talking to the right person, because there's a question, well, when you dialed that person, was that really the voter that you're trying to reach? Completely unique names. There's no doubt. And the most famous example is Nashon Garrett. And I'm sure we've talked about that before. A fellow who's registered to vote in Arizona, has been training to wrestle in Tennessee for the last several years, definitely didn't cast a ballot. We didn't even reach him. We left him a voice message. And then he did some digging on his own. And he's the only Nashon Garrett in the state of Arizona on the voter rolls. And not only did the state of Arizona in Maricopa County mark him as having voted, but they marked him as signature verified. Yep. So how did that, there are a lot of mysteries about what happened in this election, but there's just one mystery I really want to have solved, which is what happened with him? Who cast that ballot? How did that happen? And that's sort of my leading answer that I really want to get an answer to. And I mean, if we can go on a little bit of a tangent, though, I would like to talk a little bit about our field program in Arizona. Is that okay?
Yeah, we sure can. Absolutely.
So thanks to the generosity of a very successful businessman, a clean energy entrepreneur, a veteran of our nation's military, Jim Lehman, we have been given about $2 million to go into the field in Arizona to tackle, which is really the third biggest problem with voter fraud, which is that it distracts us from what was a much bigger problem. Now, again, I say that voter fraud and illegal ballots affected the outcome of the election, such that we don't really know who won, right? But what had 100 to 1,000 times bigger impact on the election was the fact for the last 4 years, the left has dumped hundreds of millions of dollars from Soros and Stiers and Zuckerberg to register, educate, and turn out to vote their core progressive base in urban centers. And there was nothing like that on the right to counter that. Fortunately, Jim Layman had the wisdom to recognize that, look, we can't surrender this game to them on the left. We've got to get engaged. So Look Ahead America is deploying across the state of Arizona 5 field offices, 25 full-time staff, hundreds of volunteers to go into these communities of disaffected patriotic Americans, register them to vote, get them educated and engaged, so they understand why it's important they vote, and then when the election comes, turn them out to vote. And my hope is that Jim Layman's leadership in this case in the state of Arizona will inspire other states to step forward and say, look, we need Look Ahead America's program here in our state too, because we cannot continue to surrender community organizing to the left. It's something we've got to do, and it's something we absolutely can do better than they do.
If you're in North Carolina, if you're in Georgia, if you're in Arizona, you need that. These are areas where we're seeing booms of not just population growth. You have the Atlanta metro area, Phoenix, right? And in North Carolina, look, Apple just announced they're going to build a plant over in Wake County. These economic changes have impacts on political affiliation statewide. And it seems like the left has done a great job when they see these population increases in these professional class areas. They have done a better job of registering them than Republicans of going out and finding voters that, you know, you can't rely on Donald Trump for everything. The Republican Party is going to have to get past the era of Donald Trump. He did great at bringing out people who felt like their vote didn't matter, or they didn't want to vote for anybody, and hadn't voted in years. And he did it again 4 years later, no doubt, without question. But there was no actual infrastructure there. That was one man doing that in many of these areas, Matt. So that's what you're talking about is really critical. Because rest assured, North Carolina, like I said, and other states, when the Apple plant brings in all of those new people in Wake County, they will register them. Okay, they will get on the voter rolls. So that's just that's something to be said there. It really is. But yeah, there's something else I wanted to turn and ask you here. So the media pushback to you, and I was talking about this on purpose with the 5 levels of certainty that we have matching somebody. The media pushback, one of the more ridiculous ones I've seen on what you were doing, was the way that you match those voters to the record, which is industry standard. If you which is what was ridiculous about it. If you go into our voter file, national voter file database, and I'm looking for people by certain, that is the query you run in the database: name, first name, last name, middle initial or middle name, address. The media pushback to this was awful in the beginning. I'm sure it was for you as well. How do you find people? I saw the tweet you put out yesterday from Peter at the Epoch Times. And this is why I wanted to ask you this. All the people I have invited, Matt, to come and look at the stuff we've done. And this not only goes to 2020, but even polling work we've done. And nobody ever took me up on it, except for Peter at the Epoch Times. It's incredible because you'll get in all of this pushback, but you won't get very many good faith offers to say, okay, let me take a look at it. How's your experience been with that?
And I think the worst case of all is PolitiFact, who basically claimed to debunk my data, but it was one error after another. And they didn't even bother to try to reach out to me or talk to me or give me a chance to even reply. They just wrote it based on a bunch of erroneous material, including a quote from the Secretary of State of Georgia, supposedly debunking my research in his phone call with President Trump. Yeah, in the phone call with President Trump, he said, Matt Braynard's data is junk. He sent us 5,000 dead people, and only 2 of them turned out to be dead. Well, I never gave him a list of dead people. I mean, and that was what was cited in the Political report. In fact, one of the earliest things that I came out and said when we were doing our investigation is that the earliest conclusion is that one of all the analysis that we were running, including an analysis where we were trying to identify voters who were dead who had ballots cast their name, we really just did not find that to be a phenomenon. And I made a video. I said it. I took a lot of criticism because a lot of folks are insisting on mass voting from dead people, and I'd love to talk to them about how they came to that conclusion. But I just said, look, it's just not happening. Yet we have the Secretary of State telling the president in a recorded call that he leaks to the media, yeah, Matt Braynard gave me 5,000 dead people, and it was just garbage. And then PolitiFact cites that as evidence that I don't know what I'm talking about. And it's almost like we're in the Soviet era where they basically manufacture the news from whole cloth, and it's asinine. But there's that type of bias. But I think the other type of bias, which you're at, which I think is more endemic and more of a problem, is when they choose what to cover and what not to cover, regardless of how they curve the coverage of what they're covering. So if they don't cover you and your research, no matter how good it is, you could have Jesus descend from on high and appear and say, look, this is what actually happened in the election. If they don't cover it, it just never happened. And I'll tell you that when we first started doing our investigation, we started raising a lot of money through Give, Send, Go to pay for it. Call centers and data, very expensive. The Washington Post actually sent, not only did they cover our initial investigation, they sent a reporter, an expensive photographer to come take pictures of our bunker here where I live, where we basically converted this apartment into a place where we had, I think, 14 people working at the same time on this project, because they weren't interested in what we're doing. They just wanted to make the White House staff, who had taken time off, vacation days, to come help with this, to try to make them look bad. That was the angle of the story, and they were very eager to cover it. But when we started releasing our findings, quite compelling findings, which are backed up by peer-reviewed scientific research, and which we continue to validate and validated in our Georgia report quite thoroughly. This is not speculation. These are not statistics. These are names, addresses, dates of birth,
actual records,
actual real people. Like, this person cast a ballot who should definitely not have been eligible. It was an illegal ballot, or had a ballot cast in their name. Totally legal. Washington Post disappears. They all go away. They have no interest in it. And I got to say, there was one reporter from the Atlanta Journal-Constitution who reached out. He said he wanted the unredacted report. He agreed to the ground rules. I sent it to him. I look forward to what they may uncover with it. I know that paper is the one that is a pretty hard left bias, but I'll take my lumps, and if they find some criticism of our work, we'll definitely own that.
Yeah, we went the local route, the local news route. That's what we tried to do. Look, you know what? You maybe know these officials. You have relationships with people. Maybe you can chase down some of these records and tell me maybe we're wrong. I mean, the idea is to go out and disprove it, right? So, like you, I saw a bunch of these claims. This many people voted. They were dead, right? And that's how that started. Because I'm thinking I could just open up the voter file and try to find this out. This is, and it is expensive. Unfortunately, it's the reality of it. But we didn't get much cooperation from local news, and then it was clear that the national media wanted to come after you. So PolitiFact is a repeat offender, but I have to give credit where credit's due. Snopes did give me a fair shake. So PolitiFact put out a bogus fact check about me saying 140,000 or 30,000 change of address flags were in Fulton, Georgia, which they took, Matt, to mean that 135 plus whatever it was voted. And I simply said that there are change of address flags, and they twisted that. At least Snopes did call and say, listen, what is a change of address flag? Because I don't think they even knew. And what are you saying, by saying this? PolitiFact just ran with it, Matt. They just ran with it. Oh, he said that,
they're very sloppy. They're very sloppy. And I think they've been widely discredited. In fact, they've got multiple Twitter accounts that basically document how inaccurate they are. So, but there's also the issue of confirmation bias, which I think we really run into a lot.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get that a little bit on the right too, where
sure,
if you don't want to believe that there was any illegal ballots cast that had any impact, you're just not going to believe it, no matter what you read, no matter where you read it. And if you're on the right, and you might have some belief that something that I can't vouch for, but there was something really wrong with how machines tabulated votes, and there's nothing that's really going to convince you otherwise either. And I think that part of the problem, and this is why I'm such a big believer in the analysis that the Voter Integrity Project at Look Ahead America did, is that everything that we made an argument for as being a problem with the election, this was all something that anybody could understand, anybody could access. Everyone, you don't have to be an expert in statistics to understand what national change of address database is and how it works, because I think most people have participated in it. They understand what it means. And I think that what got us in trouble in the aftermath of the 2020 elections, there were a lot of folks putting material out there, a lot of theories, where they would go to, say, a spokesperson, like an attorney with a lot of status with the president or something like that, who was basically a spokesperson for them,
no
and
doubt.
say, look, this is what happened. And then that attorney is like, oh, okay, now that attorney isn't an expert in statistics. Or you get somebody giving like some statistical exposition on why this proves there was election fraud, right? And the reality is that you as a viewer, unless you have a similar background in statistics, you think that what's happening is he's convincing you because of a statistical analysis. But what's really happening is he's convincing you on the basis of trust and confirmation bias. You want to believe what he's saying, and you're just simply trusting that this individual is putting it together coherently. It makes sense.
You're hoping he's credible. Yeah.
Well, you're hoping it's a trust me thing, and nothing that Voter Integrity Project, that Look Ahead America, has ever been a trust me proposition. Everything we do is easily replicatable. It's easy to take a list of the people who cast a ballot in the state of Georgia and run it through the federal government. The Postal Service does it for you, the National Change of Address match. It's easy to get a national voter file and then do a tight match. And we didn't do any matches that were not like 100%. So for example, my middle name is Martin, right? If we found a Matthew Martin Braynard born on May 4th in Georgia and also found him registered to vote in South Carolina, but it was Matthew M. Braynard, May 4th, I'm not going to give my date of birth, but if it wasn't a full exact match, even a difference in middle initial, we didn't count it. And we accounted for that in our Georgia report, saying that, these are the 3 tranches of voters we could identify as tranches of illegal votes. And there's 3 other tranches that we have no idea how big they are, because only the state can really do them, using things like complete access to driver's license databases, social security numbers, all those things we didn't have. So we were extremely cautious in our analysis. But none of it requires you to really have any expertise in anything other than being an American, I guess, or to have to trust me, because anybody else could replicate this. And I think the problem is that a lot of that stuff, sorry, I'll wrap this up. But
no, go ahead.
A lot of the folks who became spokesmen and leaders were getting tangled up with things where they had a trust me relationship based with somebody that they probably shouldn't have trusted. And then they get, okay, so you've made this claim, come talk about it on a primetime cable news show. And they're like, I can't talk about it, I'm not an expert. Whereas, our stuff, they could easily have talked about. It's unfortunate that it got drowned out by a lot of some of the more marginal theories.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. You're being nicer than me, but I'll tell you right off the bat, the stuff about the machines wasn't helpful. It wasn't helpful. And some of the voices behind some of these other theories, it was really clear, Matt, when people would call and ask me, well, how does this happen? They really didn't understand or have an idea of how elections are conducted in many of these states. And it did, unfortunately, distracted away from the real issue or issues, because there were multiple of them. But yeah, it just wasn't helpful. And what you're talking about is something really average Americans, they really do get it. We just couple of weeks ago, we asked very in-depth questions about election reform. You had HR 1 in the news, you had the Georgia law that you were involved with in the news, and we wanted to know, we asked the state of Georgia this, but thought, nationally, it may be a little different. What was shocking to me is how close they were, in their views. It doesn't really matter if it's a purple or reddish Georgia versus nationally, where you'd expect a Democratic lean in views. People as long as you give them these common sense ideas and proposals, they really do get it. And it cuts across party lines. It's when it gets to the media that it starts to get jumbled up, unfortunately. And it's unfortunate. It really is, because I think most of us can agree on this.
Yeah, and can we take a moment to go back to machines for a half second?
Absolutely.
Because look, here's what I have to say about machines. First of all, is that I'm not an expert on the way the machines work. And I understand, though, that there are probably people in your audience who are very passionate about the problem with machines. You probably also have, or supposed problems with machines that they believe occurred, and I can't disprove them because I'm not an expert in that area. But you also have folks who are like, the minute I hear people start talking about machines, it's like I know it's Looney Tunes. And the thing is, we kind of got to get these folks back on the same page. And one of the things that Look America has done in its public policy proposals for voter integrity reforms, we've made this the #1 issue. And I know what I'm talking about here, because I've actually gotten 2 horrible letters, 2 nasty letters from Dominion that we turned around and our attorneys literally shredded them in public and just humiliated the attorneys. And I encourage folks to look into this. But what we propose is that a requirement that every state and county, all of their voting equipment, be open sourced. And when you have open source voting equipment, it's like a glass box. There's nowhere in a glass box to hide a trap door or a secret entrance. Whereas what we have right now is black box voting equipment almost everywhere. And it's proprietary, it's expensive, and it allows suspicions about how the machines, what they may or may not have done, because they're completely obfuscated. Not only are states not able to open the machine up with a screwdriver or look at the source code inside it, they're forbidden by the contract they sign with that provider from even attempting to reverse engineer it. And it's unconscionable in a democracy that we have our elections are depending on these machines to count, generate, adjudicate these votes. When we can't look at the exact lines of code that are being executed to determine who our government is. And that creates a space for a lot of theories to develop and take hold. So that, whether you are a Democrat or a Republican or leftist, rightists who believe there are problems with machines or not, we can all agree that it's unconscionable for a democracy to depend on a proprietary company that does not let the government or citizens see how the votes are being counted to have a role in our elections. So we've been a very loud advocate of this, and we think this is probably one of the issues that we can have the most bipartisanship on, because if you look back just a couple of years, it was the left that was screaming about these black box voting equipment, making documentaries on HBO about it. In fact, I like to cite that there was a law introduced into Congress, it didn't pass, to require open source voting equipment nationwide. That legislation was introduced by a Democrat named Rush Holt. And Rush Holt's profession before he came to Congress wasn't as a lawyer or lower level politician. His profession was as a scientist, specifically a physicist. And this is one of those issues where whether you think there were problems with machines or not, this helps to solve it. It goes a long way to solve it. And it does other wonderful things too that make it very easy. And look at America, we've got thousands across the country that are scheduling meetings with their state legislators. It's not just about elections, it's about lowering the cost of maintaining this election equipment. I mean, we were successful. We got the Clark County in Ohio to pause their purchase of black box voting equipment. We got the state of Louisiana to pause and potentially withdraw a $100 million purchase of Dominion voting equipment, to have them reconsider this. But that equipment is extremely expensive, not just to buy, but when you buy black box voting equipment, only that company can maintain it. That's a very expensive service contract that they own exclusively. Why? Because no one else can open the machine up. No one else knows how the software works. And these are machines they're counting on to run for a generation. And the maintenance, when you change how elections work, updates, all this stuff, that's expensive. So when we advocate for open source voting equipment, it's about lowering costs, but also creating home state jobs. Very few of these companies are located in the state that buys the equipment. Some of them aren't even based in the United States at all. Whereas if you have open source voting equipment and you're unhappy with the vendor that's currently servicing it, and if they're out of state, you can turn to local vendors, local technical firms to service that equipment, to repair it and maintain it, because it's all open source. And this isn't anything new. There are other countries that use open source voting equipment and software. Microsoft has a version of, I think it's Voter Guard, they make available in third world countries because no one trusts the elections there, that is required to be open sourced. The country of Belgium, their elections run on open source software that you can download from GitHub and examine yourself. So this isn't anything new. It's just something that we're counting on people to educate their state legislators about the many benefits of getting rid of black box voting equipment and going to the open source model. Number one of which is that everybody in this audience who thinks, look, those machines stole the election or whatever it is they think, that problem is eliminated. It's eliminated with the solution.
Yeah, I was going to bring up Microsoft, and it's the same principle behind even modern website development and which website's safe, which not. That's the whole idea behind WordPress, and make it open source. You know what goes into certain themes and etc. And Microsoft, right, they've been offering that for a while now. So yeah, those, by the way, those are not only big wins, which you talked about preventing them. It's not just a big win for election integrity. It's a big win for the taxpayer, because these is so. I've been doing this a while, man, and I didn't even realize until this past election. I mean, I knew it was expensive, but I didn't realize how expensive some of this stuff was. And then if you do have those contracts, they can charge it. They really have the state, they got them, basically. They can charge them what they want. Once they pass their review and they get that contract, that's it. And it's a ton of money. I don't think many people even understood how much it was for this equipment and the maintenance of this equipment. The only question I will say with Dominion that I had, was Texas. So we got a million emails with a million different theories, right? I'm sure you did as well. And sifting through one of them, I did notice there was somebody had given me a report from Texas. The only question I ever had was why it failed in Texas, and I haven't gotten a good answer to that. Did you hear any reason why it did not meet the standards for the state of Texas? I think that's a legitimate question to ask.
I am as illuminated on the answer to that as you. And one thing that I've been very careful not to do throughout all of this is to speculate.
Right.
So,
yeah, don't do that.
I guess we'll just have to we'll get the real answer, and we'll keep pushing to get that. And I'm pretty optimistic that in the state of Texas we'll get down to it eventually.
Yeah, they seem to be. I mean, they have comparatively to some other states. Florida's also typically anyway pretty good with being strict, having rigorous safeguards. Texas is another, but not everybody. Unfortunately, not everybody is. So the work Matt's doing is really something else. Matt, if you had one, and this is a question I get all the time, if you had one reform, and I know it's complicated, it's a hard to answer question because it's such a complicated issue, but if you had one reform that you could get, that every state would be knocking down your door for a recommendation, what would it be?
Well, it's hard to say because we've made 6 of them, but I think that the one that probably is most important is the thumbprint authentication of any kind of absentee ballot. Because the thing about absentee ballots is you get them, there's no ID necessarily being shown. Like when you walk into a polling place, okay, you require a driver's license, some kind of ID, and it gets checked. At least that's the case here in Virginia, and I think that's the case in many places. And I think that's important. But I think what's absolutely important though is authenticating those absentee ballots, because it eliminates so many problems. And I think that and interestingly enough, it was just a couple of years ago that the Washington Post wrote an article about how widespread and easy it is to commit voter fraud through mail ballots.
And the New York Times too.
Yeah, exactly. And it's remarkable how they've become so quiet about it. But saying, and I adopted my language of saying that our conclusion is that the deserved winner of the presidential is unknown and unknowable because of the number of illegal ballots cast. Now we don't know who those ballots were cast for, right? But it is unknowable, and that's our conclusion. But that language comes from, I think it was the Washington Post who written a story about how fraud occurs with mail-in ballots. And there were many elections, they said, that had happened and likely will happen where we don't know the deserved winner because of ballots not being authenticated to a voter. That thumbprint solves everything. South Korea's figured this out. When you go to vote in South Korea, put your thumb on the scanner. I have Clear. When I fly, that Clear thing where you can basically pay money to cut the line, that works the same way. And for frequent flyers like us, it's actually kind of a real lifesaver, but that works. And that's a semi-government, it's basically a government contractor because they have access to the airports to be able to do that. And I know that the government depends on thumbprints and iris scans elsewhere. There's no reason why this technology can't be used to secure our elections.
And I got a comment before. It was, in fact, Barack Obama who warned about proprietary voting machine. It was, in fact. I had to double check. Yeah, it was. It appears to be an event when he was running against Mitt Romney. I do have to chase that down and nail that down, but he did indeed say what we got to worry about, and then he goes on to say, "Trust me, I'm from Chicago, I know," or something like that. So, but he goes on to say, we just can't have the other side controlling the voting machines. Which again, if it was
that was back when Democrats were afraid of Diebold.
That's right. Yeah, it has to be. That sounds about right. It sounds like the right time frame. And we had clips of Jerry Nadler. I don't even know. Countless. It's just amazing to me. One of the shocking things about all of this is in 6 months and 8 months, how people who have been talking about an issue one way for years can have just flipped the way they did. The impact on turnout is one and the impact on potential fraud is the other. And it's shocking to me. You have people who literally wrote article upon article about how unsafe it was and how how it would open up the risk to potential fraud in different areas, now completely reversing themselves, and that it's just safe and sound and nobody can question it. And it's I mean, for a little bit there, just even mentioning it, I don't know how you skated on it, honestly, Matt. I don't know. I got it. If it wasn't for Tucker, I'd still be suspended from Twitter. But all I did, was no warnings. I was gone.
Well, I think I never really crossed the line of, because remember, this video's got about 200,000 views on YouTube. I think there might be a warning under it that it just generally goes on top of all of the messages about anything having to do with the election. But remember, my conclusion was that the number of illegal ballots surpassed the margin of victory, such that the determined winner of the election is unknown. That's quite a bit different than the language that other people were using, which I think, I don't know how you can conclude definitively that. I just haven't seen the evidence that, yes, this is the pure evidence that it was stolen. I'm sure after this, my inbox will be full of people sending me charts and sort of things. And, it's what was interesting to me about this election, and you were probably getting this too, is that especially in the heat of running the voter integrity project, I was getting bombarded with phone calls and messages saying that see what I found here. I downloaded the voter file, or I did a time analysis of when the votes came in, not recognizing that we have a phenomenon in this country where we've got precincts that vote 90 to 100% for the Democrat. And they, because they're in a concentrated area, they tend to all get reported in at about the same time. And they always have. And if you look back historically, well, that happened in other elections too. And they sort of get caught up on these line charts. And again, it's a lot of confirmation bias and a lot of the trust me principle, or, I don't want to say Dunning-Kruger here, but people not knowing that they really don't know. And I'm sure you have a similar history to mine. I've been working in elections since 1994. That's the first election where I had a leadership role, organizing fellow high schoolers to call and, look at American nonprofit, nonpartisan, don't endorse candidates parties. But when I was in 1994, I was working for the local Republican Party, organizing fellow school students to run phone banks to turn out people to vote. I've seen votes come in at every level. I've worked on 5 presidential campaigns, et cetera, et cetera. But you get this person who woke up and maybe they never even voted before the year 2020. And they're like, oh, I'm an expert in, detecting election fraud now. And it's unfortunate that kind of can drown out a lot of the more valid criticisms.
And social media makes that worse. It really does. This overnight expert thing, it does really make it worse. And that those line charts, what you try to explain to people, you just really nailed it, which is that the times don't necessarily tell you much unless you have similar demographic areas and the margins from those demographic areas, which is very difficult. And this year it made it even more difficult because there wasn't, typically we have some kind of precinct level data immediately. So to jump to those conclusions were hard. And I think that was another one that really kind of distracted away from the crux of the argument here, which is that we do not have very well maintained voter rolls. The records themselves are not very well maintained. And if you cannot verify those ballots, then we have a serious problem. And it's the appearance, Matt. It's the appearance. It doesn't even, I think this is really what would put a lot of people at ease, right? And I think when we poll this, people just say, I understand it's not going to be a 100% perfect system, but can we at least eliminate the areas where there can be egregious suspicion, really egregious examples that would give me reason to be suspicious? And verification just seems like the simplest one. It really does. So you said the fingerprint. I think I'd probably agree with you there. I like deadlines too. I do, but that's almost, it's difficult to ask human beings to perform at that level. They are just human, and we went through this rapid change in the system so quickly. You had to expect quagmires, and we weren't built to do it. We had whole states like Pennsylvania who really never took to early voting. They really didn't. And I think some people who live in Florida and Arizona, they do a lot of mail-in voting before that. They don't realize that. It just is difficult for some officials to, in 2 months in some cases, completely change how they do elections. And it's not possible.
Absolutely.
Not without problems.
And I actually was working last year on a primary in Idaho where they decided they were going to do like mass mail voting, which they've never done it before. And rather well-seasoned Secretary of State was going around telling people that, yeah, you can register, you can request your absentee ballot on our website. Well, they'd never done this before, and the website continually crashed. And a lot of I work as a general consultant for candidates all over the country, and a lot of our voters were disenfranchised because of that. And again, the Secretary of State said, until this time, you can go to the website and request your absentee ballot. And for days leading up to it, it was broken, it was down, while he was still going on the radio saying this. So we actually brought a case in federal court suing the Secretary of State. And we prevailed. We won. We forced a deadline extension, and all. Even though everyone told me that there's no way you're going to win this, I said I know we're going to win this. Even our own attorney said we were going to lose. I said no, we're going to win it, and this is why. And we prevailed. So I've been in court cases, and I don't know. Just looking back on 2020, I think that when I'm working for the attorneys, things don't go nearly as well as when the attorneys are working for me. So I guess that's a lesson.
No doubt. No doubt. So, really, what do we got? A couple of minutes here left in the hour. Given the importance of verification, I want to just get your thoughts on this audit in Arizona. Because, my number one response to people is, it's an audit. It's not a recount. It is a little bit different. But I'm curious to see what you think of it. Because really, we're not verifying signatures here, Matt. In some cases, maybe you know more than I do. Maybe they've asked you, about this. But what are your thoughts on this process?
I'm very well connected to the people running that audit. I know them very well. I've actually spoke to them. And there's some things I really just can't share. But first of all, I'm curious. Secondly, I think the audit is actually, as bad as Maricopa does running its elections, we actually need the audit in Arizona in the other counties.
In the other ones,
at least as badly. Yeah, honestly, Maricopa, despite its problems, it actually ran a pretty, relative to the other counties in that state, pretty decent operation. Is that they were releasing chase lists, and for those who don't know, it's like when somebody votes an early absentee ballot, campaigns really want to know that ballot has already been turned in, so that we can stop contacting the person. Or if they've requested the absentee ballot and haven't returned it yet, we want to know that so we can go chase that absentee ballot and make sure the person votes it the right way. When you're working for a campaign, that's what we do. So we call that chase list. And Maricopa actually maintains a very good chase list, and still problems, still important. But I think it was important that the other counties have that audit as well. I'm kind of curious to see where it goes, but I think that the real problems that we've got to identify and eliminate are not so much the counting of them, but who cast them, finding out who cast them, in whose names they were cast, whether they were legitimate from that. And because if you think about how even some of the documented mass voter fraud efforts have worked historically, and they have happened, sometimes it happens on the counting side, but more often than not, it's just basically ballot box stuffing. And you can't stuff a ballot box without checking off a name of somebody as having cast those ballots, which means you have a population of people who didn't vote, who will say they didn't vote, yet they were marked as having voted. And I think that's really where our focus has been. And that's not, I think, where the Arizona audit is. But again, they may find something that, I'm not an expert on that stuff, and they may find something that is damning. So I'm very curious to see where it goes. But I think we also need to be prepared for the fact that, they may just come out and say, look, it was off by like 12 votes. But
right.
Otherwise, no problem.
Yeah, that could absolutely happen. Really. Well, look, Matt, I got to thank you for joining us. Where can everybody follow what you're doing? Where can they support you? Go ahead, give them all the information and volunteer. So I got a lot of willing people. They're fired up.
Look, we're engaged in every state with really cool activities for people involved with. I'm going to take just a half minute to tell you. So, for example, what we're doing in Georgia, the last voter integrity law that passed through Georgia, it didn't eliminate Sunday voting. It didn't require it everywhere. It just said it continues to be optional. But where it's optional right now are in the progressive urban centers of the state. The rural counties, people there don't have the opportunity to vote on Sundays. In the urban counties, that's called souls to the polls, where the pastors march their parishioners down to the election office on Sundays leading up to the election. Our new initiative in Georgia is to get all of those counties, those rural counties, to also allow voting on Sundays. And what we're going to do, we're going to do patriotic souls to the polls, and we're going to do it much better than the left ever has. And our volunteers in that state are organizing to do that, to get the state to provide funding for it, which is now possible because of our own initiative that passed into law that said that if Zuckerberg wants to drop money into the election system, it has to be distributed equally through the state. That's a win that Look Ahead America secured in Georgia. So we're going to take that money. Get it to the counties. So, because a lot of the complaints the counties make is say, like, oh, we can't afford, we don't have the money to pay people to run it on Sundays. Well, now they do. Now we've got to get the counties to agree to do it by passing it in the counties. And then the third step is get all the pastors and of all those churches to get their parishioners to recognize that, look, Sunday is holy, it's sacred, keep holy the Sabbath. But when we're basically in a small civil war here, and all of those progressive urban churches that violently disagree with you on everything from abortion to even religious liberty are all marching their people down to vote on Sunday, you got to do the same thing for those 2 Sundays leading up to the election. So that's just and we're doing initiatives like this in all of the states. But we're sort of furthest along in Georgia. It's the one I'm most excited to talk about. But if you're interested in really volunteering and being told to do something, because we will tell you to do stuff, and you will have a coordinator who will make your phone ring and light up your inbox for email. Sign up to volunteer at lookaheadamerica.org. And if you can't do any of that, we're a very lean operation. We don't have a lot of money. Contributions absolutely help. They help pay for the national staff, help pay for our software, help pay for us to clean the voter list and address what happened in Arizona. All of that costs money, and Michael can tell you how expensive some of this data and some of the processing is. So please volunteer or contribute at lookaheadamerica.org.
That's it, folks. That's it in a nutshell, from Matt's mouth to your ear. All right, I get a lot of people saying, what can I do? What can I do? Well, there it is. That's what you can do. I mean, there it is. Matt, thanks for joining us so much. I really appreciate it. Come back. Tell us what you're up to. We'd love to hear it.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me.
All the best, Matt. All the best. Folks, that was Matt Braynard. There you go. I told you earlier this week, we'll let him tell you the story and tell you what he's got going on. Look, I know a lot of people say, that we just spoke about it for an hour. What can we do? I feel down. The system's broken. Well, it's only permanently broken if you don't do anything about it, right? So there's someone offering a way for you to have some kind of you can participate in being part of the solution, and that's important. We're going to take a quick break and give you the bone bam with Inside the Numbers. We'll be back. I'll do a little rant, then we'll bring on my good friend Don Smith. Thanks for watching Inside the Numbers. Hang tight for 2.5 minutes, folks.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends, and spread a little love just for a little fun.
Laura finally got that fly
back to me before the rise of every sun. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah.
2-minute mark, folks. 2-minute
I
mark.
love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear for a night, just to give into the need and leave it all behind. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be
And we're back to Inside the Numbers with the People's Pundit. I am your host, Rich Baris, the People's Pundit. You can follow me on Twitter at peoples_pundit. Of course, sign up for our locals page, peoplespundit.locals.com. We will have a nice little interesting conversation this week, folks. I want to know what ones you want to keep in, and this is to the locals community, what questions you want to keep in. This will be different from the late spring survey that is in, the funding. I decided I just want to get really a hit on Biden's approval now that we're at this 100-day mark, and now that he gave his joint a speech to Congress, the quasi State of the Union. Honestly, and I'm not saying this to be a schmuck here. Honestly, the viewership was so low and it was so partisan. I don't see any opportunity for a bump. I'll let the people speak. I'll let them tell me, but I want to know. So I think we're going to do that. And it's just easier and, frankly, cheaper to keep one of the questions from last time to see if there's any change in, or even a matrix. Maybe election, we just have Matt on. I don't know, but we'll talk about that on locals, all right? But as always, that, like I said, that will be different because that the public polling project, when we do these surveys, they're going to entail, it's a larger questionnaire. And it will entail a lot of things that we did do last time. The sentiment index, which I wanted to do today, but we wanted to have Matt on. We'll talk about the sentiment index on Monday with Robert, all right? Or maybe we'll do something. Well, we'll see.
We'll
see.
about it.
But that's a monthly or at least periodic indicator. It's the first one ever of a registered voter only because, it matters what consumers think. But when we're talking about, as it relates just to the election, how do voters feel about the economy, then why on earth would we ask everybody? It's like asking all adults who you're going to vote for, right? So who cares? Or even when you get closer to an election, you're asking registered voters who you're going to vote for. No, your job is to find out who is going to vote. All right? Which, by the way, let me just circle back. Because with organizations like Matt's, it will make my life and every other pollster's life a lot easier. Because those records are dirty, folks. They are. And if we have a population we can be more certain of as legitimate and verified, then basically it will make our life a lot easier. All right? Because a lot of those records that we were just talking about with Matt, understand when I go to the voter file to pull a voter list, right? I'm going to get a list to call people, for instance, whatever. It automatically excludes those records that are at least known change of address flags, known deceased flags. So it's very difficult for a pollster if you have, such and such number of people voting like he was talking about in Arizona that no longer live there. I may have called that gentleman. I may have called him. That's a waste of my money.
Sure is.
Right? It's a waste of cost of operating. It's a waste of time. Both of our time. 5 to 10 minutes for his interview. And 5 to 10 minutes for my whatever cents a minute. All right? It would make life a lot easier. Plus, we would all know that we can have a greater certainty. Because unfortunately, this cover, what we're going to cover and what we're not going to cover, the media can choose not to talk about this, but it's not getting any better. There's no, closing of the gap. People who think the election had a problem, guess what? Still think the election had a problem. Wouldn't it be so much better if we all could say, we took it on the chin, we lost. Or you took it on the chin, you lost. Now it's time to move forward. 4 years ago, we were inundated with Hillary Clinton and others telling us the election was stolen. Vladimir Putin stole the election for Donald Trump. Then 4 years later, we're inundated again. You cannot continue like this as a self-governing society. You cannot continue.
Where was the unification talk then?
Where was it? Well, and that's one of the, honestly, let's just talk about historical fact here. That's one of the saddest parts about how all that played out, because here you have Trump inviting Hillary Clinton to inauguration. He's trying to make amends.
Like, to
yeah,
heal
it
the
was
country.
a nasty campaign. Guess what? They're all nasty. There were NAACP ads against George W. Bush. Matt talking about when he first got, involved. My first was 4 years later, and I remember ads against George W. Bush talking about it was a younger African American girl saying her father was drugged behind a truck, and so when George W. Bush refused to sign the hate crime legislation, it was like my daddy was drugged behind the truck all over again. I mean, I don't know what else you can do. How much more nasty can a campaign be than accusing somebody of a racial hate crime? Or making someone relive a hate crime because you're just so not compassionate.
Yep.
Because Bush's thing back then in 2000 was compassionate conservatism. He rebranded it. I don't know how many of you remember this, or even maybe I'm dating myself. But compassionate conservatism. It was a new brand of conservatism, which, by the way, was not like much of the party and focused on domestic issues, not international ones. Consequently, he was the last Republican to win the state of New Hampshire. And he even lost it 4 years later because New Hampshire was a very anti-war state. Back then, low tax, anti-war. Low tax, anti-war. But in many cases, socially liberal. So it was like a tightrope. A tightrope. You had to walk a tightrope to win that state. And George W. Bush is the last Republican to do so. All right, so I'd be remiss, not to say Matt put it maybe a little bit better than I have in the past, because people are like, I bring up Michigan, and I'm like, I got to tell you, I think probably Biden would. The problem for me, and Matt stated it, guys, is that if you twisted my arm, of course, would I tell you that I think it helped one side more than the other? Of course. But as a numbers guy, you cannot say for I'm certain this would have happened. I'm certain they're beyond margins of victory in the states. Some of the states, not Michigan, however. I'm not certain of that. But I think he put it best. I think he put it responsibly, is my point. And if you want to do something, that would be the way to do it. And I'll tell you what, I don't have the image load up, but I wish I did. You don't have to feel like a partisan by getting involved in this. Maybe there's some Democrats who want to get involved in it. You should not. What I'm about to tell you is true. Yes, Republicans support these proposals at higher rates, but majorities support these proposals across the board. What he's talking about, what I'm talking about, are not radical ideas.
It's not partisan either.
It's not partisan. You could say, well, Republicans are 75-80 and Democrats are 65, or some of these are 60, but we have showed them, yes, when it comes to the verification procedures, the deadlines, for the first time ever, verification by signature match polled higher than photo identification this time. I can't even tell you how incredible that is, because we've been asking both these questions for a long time. And photo ID was always widely supported. It seems like the more the country talked about this issue, the more despite the media trying to smush it, right? The more the country spoke about this issue, the more popular it became. All right? The more popular it became. So I'm telling you, whether you're a Republican, you're an independent, you're a Democrat, do not feel bad for agreeing with these proposals. The fingerprint is where it is at, folks. You guys serve in how many in the audience served in the military after 9/11? Did you volunteer to go and join the military after 9/11 when the terrorist attack took down the World Trade Center, another one hit the Pentagon? Did you go to Afghanistan? Did you go to Iraq? The purple finger, folks. The purple finger is based on that principle. They just didn't have the tech. But the point is, you are now identified as having voted. That ink's not going anywhere. It's really the same principle. If you can put your fingerprint on an iPhone, or on the MacBook, or on the iMac, then you can put it on a pad when you go to vote. And Matt even brought up the frequent flyer cheater line.
Yeah.
That's it's contracted out, but I think it's It's TSA, but most airports I've seen, they contract them out. It's not like, I don't understand how there can be people for a national database for gun control, but not okay with a fingerprint. You're already in. Were you born? They have a print of yours.
Yes.
We're not talking about something overly rigorous, I mean, a 6-point match, is good for most. Well, I know they have gotten stricter in some legal arenas, but a 6-point match is not. It is not unreasonable. It is not unreasonable to ask for a 6-point match. It's just not. All right. So with that, I want to talk more about. I'm going to talk more about what happened this week politically. We had the first joint address. I want to bring in Don, my good friend Don Smith. We had the first joint address, and I'd like to get Don's. First of all, you know what? Let me just bring him in real quick. Don, welcome to the show, my friend. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
We had the joint session of Congress, whatever you want to call it, Don. It wasn't a State of the Union, whatever you want to call it. And I have to say, what jumps out at me immediately, we both love history, what jumps out at me immediately was the line about the January 6th event being the worst attack on our democracy since the Civil War.
Wow.
Take it away, my friend. Just take it away. First of all, how are you? Thanks for being here. And take it away.
Living the dream.
Living the dream.
That was crazy. Come on. I mean, geez, I think, I don't know, 9/11? Anybody remember that? I think that was kind of a bad day.
Pearl Harbor?
Exactly. That was just absolutely insane. What really stuck out to me was when he talked about the needs for the, right? So why are they made in Beijing, not in America? Like the stuff and all the things that have driven these businesses over all these years. Of course they're made there. And then what is he going to do? Then he follows that up with talking about how he's going to raise the corporate tax rate. He's going to raise all these taxes on all the super rich people. But he asked, why aren't they made here? Give me one good reason. I can give him about 50, and I can give him about 49 of those 50 where he's creating it. So that to the lack of self-awareness of that was, I think, astonishing to me. What he's doing with taxes, and he went on. Look at the spending that he's talking about. I mean, this is insane. But he's going to drive these businesses to China. I did a thing on my show last week about Foxconn. So that was in Wisconsin, and they wanted to, obviously they used it to make Orange Man bad, and Trump, it's all Trump's fault, and he lied to everybody, Governor Scott Walker. This was a great deal. I mean, they just cost 13,000 jobs. Well, 11,500 because there's going to be 1,500 jobs instead of 13,000. So, I mean, it's all this stuff. Foxconn was going to come back because of the new company-friendly environment, that's what creates jobs. So he couples that with he's going to create jobs. Nope, you're going to drive more businesses back. Foxconn is not coming back now because of Joe Biden and what they're going to do. They had to renegotiate this deal. So I'm a business guy. So
that's right.
His not understanding how this works and how his actions will directly impact companies in America, which obviously takes away jobs. So when he did the jobs, I'm yelling at the TV, are going to China. I mean, this guy's just unbelievable. But back to your question. Yeah, that was a horrible comment. They're gonna use this forever. They're going to use what happened on January 6th forever to show you that when he made the comment, I thought the worst comment on that was when he added on there, don't worry, this isn't going to happen again. I took that as meaning no Republicans are ever going to be elected again because we're going to pound this thing so hard what happened on January 6th that we're going to use it as a political weapon. And that's exactly what he did in that speech, in my opinion.
Yeah, and then also too, right off the board, I mean, I could go back to the transcript, but I think we all, actually, a lot of us didn't watch it, right? So another thing that jumped out at me immediately is that he couldn't get 12 million people. He got 81 million votes, but he couldn't get more than 12 million people to watch this speech, Don. I mean, that's a little bit crazy to me. But also, I have to say, Donald Trump and Barack Obama, both generally in the, in a good day, 40 million range, right? And then generally, of course, more partisans are going to tune into their president, right? So Donald Trump had, in his last one, I think, a plus 16 on CBS News for Republicans. And then Barack Obama had a plus 12 in his last one. This was a plus 36, meaning very few people tuned into Joe Biden, and those who did were overwhelmingly, beyond anything we've seen before, overwhelmingly Democrats. So he's talking to an echo chamber about this stuff. And he says that, and I was thinking about for those of you who don't know, Don has been doing this thing for his locals community called Just So You Know. All right, and it's like a fact check, but fact checking, like Matt and I just talked about, is ridiculous now. I mean, the idea, they killed that term because they're such frauds. But so Don, he's got a different spin, Just So You Know, and he goes over this time, your first one, Don, was a timetable of the Trump administration's response to the pandemic. And you really went after for Biden, stating that he had done nothing at the early onset of this pandemic. And now during this joint speech, he said, I inherited the worst economy. I inherited the worst pandemic in 100 years. Isn't it true, really, Don, looking at the timeline, that he inherited a pandemic that was on the wane? He inherited an economy that they killed for political purposes. And in fact, he inherited a vaccine administration infrastructure. All right, for those of us who actually covered watched what the White House was doing. He put these deals in place already for administration, Don. This was already at the Biden administration's target. By the time Joe Biden stepped in the White House, they wanted to average that they wanted that 100 million in 100 days, right? Mm-hmm. And they were already on target to hit that. So what, if anything, could an average viewer take out of this speech? He's already talking to his own audience. What was in there to unite us? Which I'm going to get onto something after that. I'm intentionally teeing this up here. Mm-hmm. What was in there to unite people, Don?
Absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Okay, this is a guy who, not only him, but the Fauci's of the world and everybody, all the so-called experts, who all said that President Trump, there was going to have to be a miracle. So this is, keep in mind, this is all pre-election. So they're telling everybody there's not going to be they were saying, according to Joe Biden, in his words, there probably wouldn't be a vaccine until July of this year. So this is what they were saying, that it's going to take a miracle. And again, it's the Fauci's, it's the CDC, it's everybody was in on this. So they wanted to downplay and say that President Trump was not going to have that accomplished before he left. Again, pre-election. This is really important. So here he is standing up on the stage and he's taking credit for all of this. He's taking credit for all of it. This is all me. This is all, I inherited all this bad stuff. I remember he made a comment here not that long ago where he talked about when he got there, the cupboards were bare. Remember this? Cupboards were bare.
Yes,
and
the cupboards were bare.
Yeah, no, they weren't. No, they were full. All the people making the vaccines were highly producing them. It was just coming out. But according to him, we weren't even going to have shots in arms until July of this year. So it would have been, if he wanted to really unite people, he would have mentioned that. He would have said, I do have to say, it's great that the Trump administration worked with all these vaccine manufacturers, got this thing done. Operation Warp Speed was a success, and we've built on that. He can say that. I mean, he can make it politically advantageous and say, well, we've streamlined, or whatever he wants to say. But he didn't even do that. There was not one attempt to unite the American people in that speech. Not one.
Yeah, I gotta say, Don, that it was a little bit, every time I think that Biden has a chance to say something that can bring us together, he doesn't. And it's like, to me, I think they're just beyond the point of trying to win anyone over or talking to anybody. I really do believe that. I just don't see any, even Barack Obama, during the Obama administration, we used to talk about how Bill Clinton took the pivot. Why won't Barack Obama pivot? In truth, this administration makes Barack Obama look like a moderate. I'm serious. I am so, we poll this. We've asked about all these issues. they are on, and this is really a testament to how ineffective Republicans are, because they are on the wrong side of basically every single one of these issues. They have the media on their side, which helps them and gives, handicaps Republicans. But generally speaking, you would still think, that there would be, some effective Republican messaging. It's almost like taking candy from a baby, even with the media. It's almost like taking candy from a baby, but they're too busy expelling Marjorie Taylor Greene from a committee or something. And now we know, I'm not even going to bring it up, but somebody else is going to have problems, So this is... It's right there in McConnell's favorability ratings, which I tweeted out earlier. The reason why Republicans have these ratings and Democrats don't is because Democrats defend their own people and Republicans do not. So when we ask about favorability ratings about Democratic politicians, we don't get these huge chunks of Democrats saying, I don't like Nancy Pelosi. I don't like Chuck Schumer. Are there some? Of course, that's statistics. But for the most part, they circle the wagon, Don. And Republicans, they feel abandoned. So they're like, why on earth would I care about Mitch McConnell? I mean, right? I mean, why on earth? Who cares?
Exactly. And I want to point this out because I think to me, this was the stark contrast between the left and the right today. And I said this on your show last week. I said the optics were really bad for them. They knew this going in. So you're going to have Joe Biden. He's going to get up there. He's going to give his speech and he's going to promise all of free goodies and all this stuff. But then you had the response from Senator Tim Scott. The optics for them going into this were really, really bad. And look at what they did with it. They made it even worse. I mean, you got Joy Behar now telling Tim Scott, you don't even understand racism. You've got the old white lady explaining to Senator Tim Scott what racism really is. That Incredible. Right there. That is liberalism. That is the liberal mindset. Joy Reid and Joy Behar, I'll stick with that. Joy Behar and all the white liberals, they actually do believe that they understand the Black experience in America better than any Black conservative, just conservatives now. So, I mean, the optics of that were horrible for the Biden administration. The optics of what we saw play out yesterday on social media, where Uncle Tim was like the top thing. That is just, it's horrible. It's horrible. But here's the thing. You could never sit down with Joy Behar, explain it to her, and have her actually understand what's wrong with that. You could never explain to these white liberals using Uncle Tim is like bad. That is racism. So I think in a way that I think there's something to be learned from that. And I think maybe some eyes opened up on the left where they said, wow, that's kind of like totally inappropriate. I hope so. But going into this whole thing, the optics were going to be bad because you had the old white guy, which is supposed to be the evil in the country, the old white guy giving the speech, talking down to people, and then followed up by somebody like Senator Tim Scott, who I thought he was awesome. I definitely watched his whole speech, and he did an amazing job. But just the hatred that they have and that they're so comfortable openly expressing it. That's what's fascinating about all of this.
Yeah, I mean, you had the very same people who will tell you that they are morally superior, to a certain other group of the population, being responsible for the trend Uncle Tim. Don, if Republican constituencies trended something like that against, a black Democrat who gave the rebuttal to the president, what would we be able to expect from the media and the blue checks on Twitter?
Yeah, and we know what that is. We know how quickly they react. It took them 11 hours to take down and so it's all over, Fox News and some other places. Well, only on the right, but they took it down after 11 hours, but they didn't really take it down. Tim Scott was spending in 5 using the hashtag. Nobody's shut down. Louis Farrakhan can say whatever he wants. Look at how some of these people talk on social media. You take Ellen, right? So Ellen DeGeneres is this show, and she's all about loving the fellow man, and we're all supposed to come together. Her executive producer, Andy Lasner, if you've never checked out his Twitter feed, go check it out, because he says some of the most vile things of anybody, and that's That's saying a lot because it's a sewer out there. But this guy says some of the most horrendous things. It's not like she doesn't see that. I mean, say something. Say something.
No.
Say, hey, Andy, maybe kind of scale it back a little bit. But you can't not act or say something to him and then say you're all about peace, love, and harmony.
Yeah, no, they look, that has been, oh man, when was the first time we got attacked by him? It was years ago. It was the beginning of the Trump administration. I didn't even say anything too crazy. I mean, like, in support of the press. I just simply was like, it was over collusion. And I'm like, man, let the investigation go through, man. You have no evidence of this. Like, that's a serious, you understand what you're doing when you say, and this goes back to the last hour, you cannot hop from one presidency to another in a self-governing society like this, Don, and expect credibility and to remain and no civil unrest. You can't expect that. And at that time, Hillary Clinton was running around telling everybody who would listen that Vladimir Putin stole the election for Donald Trump. That's what it started. And they were like, and he said something to the effect that only dumb hillbillies, he was like mocking middle America, would vote for Donald Trump and support a guy who's like Vladimir Putin's puppet. And I said, those dumb middle American hillbillies pay your bills. Watch Ellen's show. All right. So this is who you're mocking. Every, single mother who's sitting at home with the kids, turning on Ellen, your mother-in-law, whatever it may be, who watched Ellen. This is who you're mocking. And you just do it willfully, like that's it. Who is Ellen, who is supposed to be the uniter, right? And she's the one who was supposed to be the police. She was like the virtuous one out of cultural America, right? And she wanted everybody to get along, and she wanted to introduce America to different kinds of people. She's always into charity. She's got such a big heart, right? And said nothing about these horrible people who work for her. And then, as it turns out, allowed her members of her staff to abuse other members of her staff. I mean, it's incredible, Don. It's really back to the Uncle Tim thing. It's like one side of the country is being lectured by another that thinks and calls themselves morally superior, and in fact ends up like that. I mean, it's just, I don't know. Speak to it, my friend. Speak to it. It's just incredible. You can't get over it.
You really can, and it's not just a couple people. It's not just Ellen's executive producer. Read Stephen King. Read some of his tweets. Read Bette Midler, Cher. All these people that walk around and they lecture everybody about peace and harmony and why tolerance. They preach tolerance. They have no tolerance. None for you. None for me. None for anybody that thinks any differently than they do. And it's applauded on the left. That's what all these attacks on Tim Scott. And so white liberals calling him Uncle Tim. And then you've got black liberals coming on going, yeah, you tell them So tell me how concerned you are about racism and how it's systemic. I said this, I think last week on your show too, said it on my show, and I said it in a tweet yesterday. This is the systemic racism. It's not just that they say these awful, horrible things about somebody like Tim Scott, Ben Carson, you could go on and on. It's not that they say those things. It's the level of comfort that they have in saying them. And then the lack of anybody on the left coming out and saying, hey, I don't like Senator Tim Scott, but you probably shouldn't say things like that. It's not. They're all high-fiving each other. And who's got the most racist dig and the most vulgar thing? They said that's the winner of the day on the left. And it's just amazing to watch.
Yeah, and you played it on your show last week. I mean, Clarence Thomas, the anti-racism rally, the things they had said about Clarence Thomas. It just, it just doesn't get any more hypocritical than that. And it should be of not a surprise to anybody that, speaking of fake fact checkers, Glenn Kessler at the Washington Post decided a week before his rebuttal that he was going to go after his Cotton to Congress story. Incredible, which I was applauding some Democratic members of Congress who are in the Congressional Black Caucus, even applauding them on Twitter. Good for you, Congresswoman. Good for you, Congressman, because they did at least say this is disgusting. But here's where it ends, where anyone on Fox News would have probably had their hide handed to them for that, okay? Or anybody like you or me would have our hide handed to. There would have been repercussions. You want to talk about real white privilege. Glenn Kessler gets to tell everybody to please direct their questions to the public relations department at the Washington Post, who then chooses to not answer anybody. And I'm not just talking about people like us. The Hill, Don, they wouldn't even respond to The Hill. So who's got white privilege now? Because Tucker wouldn't be able to hide behind the PR, the public relations of Fox News. I'm not even sure somebody like Cuomo would have been able to hide behind the public relations department at CNN. So who's got white privilege now? That's real white privilege, by the way. That's real white privilege.
It is. And where are the boycotts, right? I mean, everybody should be
right.
Who are their advertisers? We got to shut them down. And there'd be this big, huge mob putting phone numbers out. Everybody call this number and be super, super mad. And none of that. It's crickets. And it always is. And so, we talk a lot about the double standard, and we do that because it's real. I mean, this isn't a fake thing. It's not nobody's got a tinfoil hat on here. This isn't something that Alex Jones came up with. This is real stuff. And we see it play out on a daily basis. You mentioned that clip. That is amazing, that the clip about Clarence Thomas. So these guys were at an anti-racism rally. And they were talking about stringing him up. They were going to cut off his toes and feed him to him one by one, put him back in the fields.
Hang him.
All white people.
Hang him.
Hang him. All white liberals saying these things. And again, no self-awareness. And they were completely comfortable saying these things at an anti-racism rally.
I can't let it pass talking about a double standard without talking about what we are seeing here again. And last week, you and I talked about this both on mine and your show, that under Donald Trump, we were told, which was a lie, it is a lie, that the Justice Department is independent from the president. The Attorney General has to be independent. Bob Mueller's like above everybody, right? Any interference with the Department of Justice is an impeachable offense, right? That was never true. The president is the head of the executive branch. End of story, full stop, period. There is no lawyer, no cop, no nothing above the president of the United States. The founders never wanted any unelected official, any unelected bureaucrat to have more power than the man or woman that you chose to lead the country. That was always nonsense. And, I wouldn't let the right pull that crap on Joe Biden either. I was just pointing out during Donald Trump that Eric Holder had flatly said he was Barack Obama's wingman and nobody cared about that. So why are we outraged now? And really, a lot of my defense on Donald Trump was principled stuff, Don. It had nothing to do with my own personal opinion. It's like basic fundamental American tenets, okay? Mm-hmm. The violation of Rudy Giuliani's, all right, getting past this raid, and we'll talk more about it. The violation of his privacy rights with iCloud, forget about the raid, which is separate. That's totally probably an illegal warrant too, by the way. But the accessing of his iCloud in 2019, the breaching of attorney-client privilege, which they did first with Michael Cohen, nobody said a damn thing, right? I cannot believe that there is nobody, I can't find anybody, not on Twitter, not on cable news, nothing. Nobody on the left is willing to have the courage to say, this is unacceptable. Here we are now again. The DOJ is weaponized. The FBI is weaponized. They refuse to take the copies of Hunter's hard drive, apparently, according to Rudy Giuliani. 20 years ago, this is a man, 20 years ago, who was America's mayor. If you're not a New Yorker under Rudy Giuliani, then maybe you don't know what I'm talking about. But it looked like, from our point of view, the whole country loved him. And he led in a terrible time of crisis. I'm not saying that's the same Rudy Giuliani. I'm not here to defend Rudy Giuliani. What I am here to do is say, if he doesn't deserve the right of privacy, if he doesn't deserve the right of attorney-client privilege, then who the hell does? If the president of the United States under Donald Trump didn't deserve his Fourth Amendment rights, his due process rights, his First Amendment rights, then who does? And where is the modern left, Don? Where's the modern left? Is the FBI now just a personal secret police force of the Democratic Party?
Yep. And here's a big thing too. So here you've got this. You're talking about, if they're going to do it to him, they can do it to anybody. Think about this for a minute. he didn't know they were doing it. So
Right.
if they're doing it to you and they're doing it to me or they're doing it to anybody watching us right now, you won't know it. If somebody like Rudy Giuliani and President Trump, the president of the United States, if they don't know what's going on, you don't either. So who knows who they're going after right now? Because we will never know that. We don't even have anywhere near the access to information that those guys had at that particular time in 2019. So if they're doing it to you, you don't even know they're doing it.
That's exactly right. And this is for all of these. I said it on Twitter before. You're either incredibly narrow-minded or you're just that unserious that you would be a journalist who tweets something like, "Let me check my notes. Who was the attorney general at that time?" You're either naive or you're just intentionally disingenuous. I don't know what it is, but you're an unserious person if that's your response to this, and you're supposed to be a journalist. Don, you should play that clip on Saturday. You know the clip I'm talking about. You busted the FBI, in all likelihood, spying on Donald Trump when you gave him that interview. Who the hell else could that possibly be? It's a closed system. There's no other way unless it was on Donald Trump's end. So for people who don't know what I'm talking about, in 2016, Don interviewed Donald Trump. And you clearly heard what sounded like interference and people talking. All right. And Trump makes a joke at the time. It must be the Chinese or something, or the FBI or something, right? He makes a joke about it. And the truth is, it went on for years. Nobody knew. It's not until they tried to launder, news is laundered. Information is laundered, right? So they leak to a newspaper, making a rumor. The newspaper publishes it. Then they use that published article as a justification to go back and clear their butts to get a FISA warrant, all right? And then the news reports they just got a FISA warrant on someone. And then now it just circulates laundering of information, all to create, they're working together to create a story and to run a smear or a political persecution. If they're doing it to the President of the United States, if they're doing it to Rudy Giuliani, they are doing it to you. And what I gotta say, really is incredible here is that this is once again, we're back to this once again. I'm not saying Republicans should have acted any differently. What I'm saying is these people who would say something that's stupid, they don't have to get a marching order from Bill Barr. Right? This is not how the government works. They don't have to get a marching order from Joe Biden. They're ideologues that dominate this government. I'm sorry, it's true. And they all think along the same lines. They're the hive mind. And they don't need Bill Barr's permission, nor would they ask it. Right? They wouldn't ask it. And we worked on a story years ago. A defense contractor owned actually stakes in multiple companies. His lawyer comes to me and he's like, "I got a story. No one will take this, but this is happening, and it's happening every day." Now, they eventually were going through litigation and didn't want to ruin it. But what he was accusing the FBI of doing was signing contracts, basically contracts with them for certain security, all right? And then the FBI was using the FISA court to take that. It was essentially intellectual property. And so they no longer needed him anymore. And then they would just render that IP useless. I mean, now the government has it, and they're going to develop it further. And I'm like blown away listening to this. He has 12 or 13 other clients who all allege the same thing. And I wanted so badly to pursue this. If I was the Washington Post or PPD at the time, they would have, if they would have cared about this story. They would not have respected those clients. They would have just ran the story, Don, if it was like a Republican administration or something. But the truth is, to pretend like Bill Barr needs to sign off on this or something before they go and take Rudy Giuliani's iCloud is crazy. I mean, come on, man. What kind of planet? They do what they want to do, and then they use the FISA court as a cover your you-know-what. It's a CYA. It's been like that for years.
Exactly. So, okay. So let me talk about that real quick, because this was in November of 2015. So 1 year before the election, Donald Trump had just taken the lead. So we had 16 Republicans in the primary. He had just taken the lead in the primary, which up to that point there was no way. I mean, they laughed about, remember the Bill Maher clip with, where they laugh about it and everybody was laughing about it. Not anymore. He just took the lead. So the day I've got him on, it's a pre-tape on a Tuesday, shows on a Saturday. The day I have him on, it just came out that he was officially the lead guy, and he never turned back. He was the lead guy, obviously, and won throughout that. So this was at a point, I think, where they started to fear him. They were like, this could be really serious. So we were doing the interview. We're 5-6 minutes into it, I think, when then candidate Trump made the comment. He's like, hey, is something going on in your line there, Don? Uh-oh. Throughout this time, I hear, and I'm sure this is what he's hearing too, I'm thinking maybe on their end, because he's in Trump Tower, which we now know that's where they were surveilling him. We now know that they had already been through the FISA court at that time. So I'm thinking maybe for prosperity, they're kind of, the posterity, they're going to tape this themselves just in case anybody says, hey, he said this, and you can say, well, no, here's the raw tape.
Right. That's what I thought too at first, honestly.
So 5-6 minutes into this before he makes a comment. But what I'm hearing in that point, and I'm thinking he's hearing it too, is faint voices. So there's 2 male voices, not enough to really tell what they're saying. And it sounds like somebody's working on something. There's scratching. There's just sounds that I've never, ever heard before. So he brings this up, and we're in the middle of talking about China. So he goes, well, there you go. That's it. But probably just China. Maybe it's, because at first he says, there's something on your end, Don. And I'm like, I hear that, but I didn't want to, say, no, it's not on my end. It's on your end.
Because it couldn't have been on your end. It couldn't have been. It's the closest. It can't be.
Correct. And I've never had this happen before. I've done hundreds, maybe thousands of interviews over the years this way, pre-taping them. So if you go back to the tape, you can't hear any of that stuff. So we could only hear it when it was taking place live. So he makes the comment, and we laugh. He goes, oh, maybe it's just China. It'll just be more fun. And we just laugh it off. Now we know it was a really serious thing. So as soon as he says that, he says, well, maybe it's on my end. Maybe it's just China. As soon as he says that, boom, I don't hear any of that anymore. There's no voices. There's no scratchy.
It vanishes.
It vanishes. And if you listen back, I've got state-of-the-art equipment when it comes to doing pre-record audio. And you go back and I can mix it and try to turn things up in different frequencies. And there's nothing there. But it was there. He heard it. I heard it. Again, he was at Trump Tower, and we now know that had already been through FISA and that they were surveilling him. So I think that was when they were actually putting everything in place. They were
it was a J. Edgar Hoover, Don. It was a J. Edgar Hoover. This guy may be the next president. We have to take him seriously now. So go get dirt on him. For those who don't know how this works, that's how it works. And then, you get called up to the White House. You're J. Edgar Hoover. You grab your little briefcase of goodies you got from spying on the guy for 6 months, and you go tell him you're not going to do anything to the FBI or else we're going to pin you down. It's that, and Donald Trump was the only one who did not play ball. Barack Obama played ball, man. We all know it. As soon as he got in there, he played ball. He played ball with the CIA, played ball with the FBI. It was very clear from the beginning that there was never any hope of real change. That was not happening. He was a ball player, and that was it. And he just, he got down on his knees. I don't know what else to say. But Donald Trump is not that guy. And shockingly, conveniently, he has a problem like Chuck Schumer alluded he would, right? You don't mess with the intelligence agencies. They got ways to Sunday to watch it, right? Remember that comment? I'm just saying this, and I'm teeing this up because now we have Rudy getting raided, all right? And I'm always willing and telling people, I will tell people the same thing. Wait for the story to to come to fruition before you draw any conclusions based on your partisan beliefs. But it is a little bit wild to me here, Don, that you have Rudy, according to the Warren, it is one single FARA violation. Nobody gets charged with FARA violations until the era of Donald Trump, where they chose to charge Paul Manafort, and that was the first, right? Meanwhile, according to witnesses Mueller interviewed, it was a revolving door at the Podesta Group with Manafort, who really was simply lobbying on behalf of them anyway. He was lobbying the Clinton State Department on behalf of Putin allies in Ukraine going through the Podesta Group. Tony Podesta skates. They all skate. Hunter Biden is clearly a candidate for a FARA violation. And Rudy had been trying to give the FBI the evidence of it for years. And here he is acting, if he's telling the truth, he is acting as the president, the former president's personal attorney, attempting to prove he is not guilty of collusion. And in fact, that is what Democrats did only with Ukraine. It's important for people to understand this here. Now, maybe there's more to the story, but if there's not, this is another level now. We're in the realm now of political persecutions. I mean, that's what we're doing. We have no leg to stand on when it comes to lecturing the world on who is and who isn't morally right, right? You can't tell Ukraine a damn thing now. Nope. You can't tell Vladimir Putin a damn thing now. Vladimir Putin can poison anybody he wants. It doesn't matter. You do basically the same thing. Right. Pot, meat, kettle. I mean, this is if this was Bernie Sanders, I'd be furious, Don. Yep. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, I'm waiting for all the facts to come out. But according to
as you should,
according to Rudy's son, and then also confirmed last night in the interview with Tucker, that there's 3 hard drives there that belong to Hunter. They were Hunter Biden's from his laptop. So
yeah, and they're copies for people who are like, why are there 3 if you only have one? They're copies, folks. The original one was handed to the FBI by the shop owner.
Yes, exactly. But here's the question you have to ask yourself. So if all that is as they say it is, which we'll wait for the facts on that. But think about this for a second. The FBI goes there to confiscate the electronic equipment. So they want they want to get all of his emails, all of his everything, texts, everything that he's done. So if they go there to get electronics, how do they know that hard drive or those hard drives, how do they know that those were Hunter Biden's?
Absolutely.
Do they have serial numbers and they go, oh, don't touch those? And according to Rudy, he even says, hey, what about these? You're here for all the electronics.
Right.
Here they are.
Very important.
And they said, no, we don't need those. How would they know that? And number 2, they would just take his word for it.
It's very odd, Don. Yes.
Because the ones he would have told them he would have said, oh, all he had to do then, I guess, is, well, that's Hunter's laptop, and it's his. And they go, oh, okay, well, then we don't want that. How in the world would they know that? And why would they take his word for it that isn't relevant to his stuff, that's somebody else's hard drive? So those are some pretty important questions that we need answers to, and it should scare the heck out of anybody.
And we all should wait for the facts and the story to, play out. But for the most part, given everything we've seen over the last 4 years, you should approach every single one of these stories as if they are false. Until the media or the feds prove otherwise. You should immediately assume that these stories are false because government is totally corrupt. This stinks like payback for exposing the Biden family's crime syndicate, which is what the hell it is. All right. And for those of you who have any experience in China whatsoever, if you don't look at what the Biden family was doing there and seeing the China model all over it, which is that you don't pay for the actual guy, you pay the guy's family and the family kicks back. And that's the China model. For anyone who doesn't know how they buy politicians, that's how they do it. I'm telling you. All right. And this smells to high heaven like payback for exposing the role that he had while he was supposed to be running point for U.S.-Ukrainian policies and allowing his son, look, everyone knows how I feel about addiction. It's in everybody's family. I have personal experience with it. That is not what I'm trying to do with. I'm simply pointing out that the man was an active addict at the time. He had no knowledge of the energy industry. He didn't speak the language. There was no reason for him to get that kind of a job, a role, or anything from Burisma, other than his daddy was the vice president. And, that basically they had a lot of money that they wanted to ramp up in energy production, which would have benefited them all. Which, by the way, Joe Biden gives a speech a couple months before instructing the Petro Poroshenko regime to ramp up energy production in the region and in Ukraine. Guys, you have to be slow. Is the nice word. Slow not to understand what's happening here. And if this was Donald Trump, who went after the lawyer of somebody who uncovered corruption about Don Jr., this would be, oh my God. Could you imagine the media right now? Could you imagine? They would be effigies burning in the front porch and on the lawn of the White House, and it wouldn't even be people. That'd be the media. Be Jim Acosta out there with his effigy burning Trump. Traitor, traitor. You know, I mean, this is, I'm sorry for getting a little heated up here, but this is such a blatant, what is going on here? It's so blatant. And maybe because they took everything of Rudy's, now they're going to find something, because this is what they do. They use some BS nonsense as a pretext. Then they seize everything you have, root through everything, including your underwear, to see if they can find a mark, you know? And then they get you on something else. That's not the original offense. You know, so if it was you, I would urge people to think about this. What if it was you? Mm-hmm. What if it was you? You're not Donald Trump. You're not Rudy Giuliani. You have no way to defend yourself against these people. What if it was you who had a team of corrupt ideological feds crawling up every orifice you have?
Yep.
Think about that before you let your partisanship cloud your reason.
Yep. It's the whole thing. It's the first they came for the Jews, but I wasn't a Jew, so I didn't stand up. And then by the time they came for me, there was nobody left to stand up. So people really need to think about this, and that goes out to the right. Look at the cancel culture. So you got people actually like Bill Maher now who are going, one of the creators of the modern cancel culture, and now he's going, oh, wait a minute, I could get canceled. Oh my goodness, this is bad. Oh yeah, it's always been bad, and I think probably everybody watching this, you and I, we know it's always been bad. So you don't realize it until it's actually you. But I want to say one thing about this whole Hunter Biden thing, because I'm getting sick of hearing from the media, he's a former addict. According to who? An addict.
An addict is an addict is an addict. You're never not an addict anymore, ever.
Well, just a little clue to the media, just so they understand this. One of the symptoms or one of the things that happens when you're an addict is you tend to lie about things. I think Hunter's got a huge history. So I'm not trying to knock addicts or get into, because I've also, like you, I've had experience with this, and it's sad. And but one thing I know is addicts lie. So when the media comes on and says he's a former addict, it's not like this stuff, Rich, happened like 50 years ago.
I know.
This wasn't that long ago. And the only person who says he's not an addict is the addict. Think about
like
that.
He's got his black chip for being 10 years free or something.
Right.
I mean, 10 years clean. This is a guy who continually falls in and out of active addiction. And, you're right. You are never not an addict anymore. You are an addict forever, for life. What matters is whether or not you're in recovery or you're in active addiction. And, and it's sad. But it has to be taken into consideration when you're being told you have to swallow some of this crap. There is just no serious... And by the way, we're just supposed to ignore Tony Bobulinski and what he said. I mean, we're just supposed to... We did. We just ignored it. I mean, this is... And now here he comes, the president. He just appointed somebody else to the criminal division at DOJ. And this guy is... Folks, if you would watch some of his activity, listen to some of the things he said, this is not a joke anymore. This is a point. These are people are being put in charge that have no business being in these positions. They are dangerous people, right? They are dangerous people, and I just hope at some point here, like you really said it, Don, like first they came for the Jews and I didn't care. I didn't defend them. By the time they came for me, there was no one left to defend anybody. Right. It doesn't matter what you have after your last name. Everyone's going to have to wake up here real soon, Don, because this is not a joke. They are infinite. They have infinite resources. They can destroy anybody's life. They can make it look like you did anything. They could not only do that, they can find the dumbest of things. Like, Michael Flynn never violated the Logan Act. That doesn't matter, does it? They got him on a process crime later on. Once you have moved from being a government of laws instead of a government of men, right? Once you move to that, then you start seeing things like the prosecution of a man or a woman instead of the prosecution of a crime, right? We don't investigate people in this country, Don. We investigate criminal activity, and that leads... How did we go so wrong here, my friend?
Look at the whole thing, okay? So look at Roger Stone, for example, and whatever you think about Roger Stone,
neither one of us will defend.
Right.
You know,
But they sent an army of people, of armed people, to bust in his place and put first thing in the morning. CNN just happens to be there. You know, they just happened to be driving down the street and went, "Oh wow, looks like something's going on here. We better film that." But think about this: Rudy Giuliani. They send 7 agents to his house because he's a really scary guy too.
To smash on the door of the former U.S. attorney, the man responsible for bringing down La Cosa Nostra. I'm Dom. We're freaking crazy. I'm sorry. Yep. I mean, we have lost our freaking minds.
Yep. But the way they deal with these people, I guess they thought Rudy Giuliani was going to go all kung fu on him or something. I don't know. Maybe he's a black belt, and I don't know that. But I had KT McFarland on my show here a few months ago. Maybe it was 6 months ago. I remember.
Great interview.
Thanks. But she detailed what happened to her. So in her situation, and she's done nothing wrong. I mean, they tried to trap her in the kind of way they did with Flynn, but she did nothing wrong. She gets a text on her phone. She's sitting there watching TV with her husband, gets a text on her phone from the FBI. "Hey, we'd like to talk to you." And she's like, "Oh, what's this?" Bam, knock on the door. They've surrounded her house. Because KT McFarland is really scary. I mean, she was going to open up a can of you-know-what, I guess, on him.
Yeah, she's going to come out swinging the saw, man, from the hip. I mean...
Yep. And she's like, "What's going on here?" And they're like, "Oh, well, we just want to talk to you and ask you a few questions, about Russia because we're concerned about, counterintelligence and all." So even the way they phrased it, they lied to her. They were there to talk about Michael Flynn.
Yeah, Flynn, they did that too. He thought they were actually there as the good guys. He really did. Which incredible to me, Don. After all his years in the military and in intelligence, you fell for that? I mean, listen, folks, never talk to the feds without a lawyer. Ever. Never, ever, ever. They are not your friends. They are not your buddies. They are looking out for number one. And by the way, putting you behind bars, whether you did something wrong or not, helps their career. Never, ever speak to the feds. I'm over the point because I know, 4 years ago, it's like a rank and file. There's a lot of good rank and file people. I know of instances, when, by the way, when some of the stuff that did happened, I know of some of the pushback. But at some point, Don, it is no longer okay to say the rank and file are good. 90% of FBI agents are good. At some point, if they don't take a stand, they are just as culpable as the Jewish people who sat around and did nothing while they put Jews in the oven. Because that is where we are at now. That's where we're at. They don't get to skate like that, Don. Someone has to effect these search warrants, have to execute these search warrants. Somebody has to go and do the digging. There's nobody. So you're telling me there was objections in the British intelligence when we were spying on ambassadors, trying to get dirt on them, so when they didn't support our UN resolution to go to war in Iraq, we were going to use that as blackmail. Somebody in UK intelligence had a problem with that morally and dropped the dime. All right, God bless her, right? Somebody had a problem at the NSA and dropped a dime on metadata collection, but there's nobody at the FBI who has a problem. I mean, there have been a few here and there, but this tells you everything you need to know about how really, talk about the word systemic, how systemic this problem really is. I'm tired of making excuses for these people. Several of them have retired. They're out. Gone.
Well, one thing too, I mean, it's not just how we talked about Roger Stone, we talked about Rudy Giuliani, how they approach these guys and pretty heavy-handed stuff there. Again, they're like you said, they're actually supposed to be on our side, fellow American citizens kind of thing.
Right.
But it's not just that. It's not just how they arrest and how they go through this. You mentioned earlier, don't talk to the feds. You shouldn't. You should always have some kind of a lawyer with you because look at the learner thing. And so I'm going back a little ways on this, the IRS thing. So she gets in there. Once you start to talk, you've lost your Fifth Amendment rights. You can't plead the Fifth anymore. So they allow her to come up and make this statement, which is a leading statement. I'm a super big angel and I didn't, she does all this stuff and then she's not going to talk. It doesn't work that way, but nobody pursued it. Nobody did anything to her. She's a Republican. Tough luck, lady. Yeah, you already spoke. So, no more Fifth for you. You're in contempt of court. Go to jail. So, I mean, And that's how they do it. It's just incredible, the whole process. So how are we supposed to trust these agencies? These agencies that we hope are protecting us are the ones actually persecuting us. That's a scary place to be.
There have been warning signs about this for a while. A lot of this dates back for a very long time, but even in modern pre-Trump, there were warning signs, Don. Just not just the FBI, but others too. You know, see, first of all, nobody was outraged when Jim Comey threw the book at Martha Stewart for an incorrect typo on an email, which is basically what it was. Nobody gave a damn. They let Martha fry over it. You know, of course, she didn't do a long, hard time, but it wasn't something she should have been really even charged with. Can we be serious? I mean, if you get, guys, in the case of Michael Flynn, what it really was like a date mix-up. I mean, it really was. The content of the conversation, what we were all led to believe, was awry, right? That was there was improper conversation going on there. That none of that was ever true. There are still tons of people on my Twitter feed to this day who believe it, because it works. And somebody pointed that out on Twitter earlier. You know, they keep doing this. They know what they're doing, but they do it because it works. And it's like, by the way, you also interviewed Cheryl Atkinson, another fantastic interview, and you interviewed her over the book she wrote, The Smear. And you really, guys, if you haven't read that, I'm not a book pitcher, but well, I like to read books that are like classics that I think are seminal, but I'm talking about like political figures and journalists. I'm not usually a pitcher of books, but that book is just fantastic because that really shows you it doesn't need to have maybe a grain of truth. The rest will just make up and will get to stick. And, 4 years later, 8 years later, 12 years later, 20 years later, people still believe the lie, and it doesn't matter. A guy just arguing with me on Twitter that Paul Manafort was paid by the Russians and they bankrolled Donald Trump's campaign through Paul Manafort. I'm like, Paul Manafort was paid by Tony Podesta and the Ukrainians. What are you talking about? And there's no Putin in FEC filings in Donald Trump's campaign. Ask Robert Mueller. I mean, if he can even form a coherent thought still, fine. Ask Andrew Weissman. Like, don't you think they would have charged him with something if there was something untoward? They never found anything, but it doesn't matter. The lie holds in the minds of so many people because, like I was talking about with Matt before, it's a confirmation bias. It happens on both sides, but at this point, we can't allow confirmation bias to cloud our reason here. This isn't about right or left or middle or what. You've got to overcome this, America. You have got to overcome this confirmation bias, these boxes they have put you in, because this involves all of you. They'll turn on you too. Look, Bill Barr tried to play ball, Don. Look, they're investigating him right now for squashing a potential investigation in a Caterpillar. Another, who thought that playing ball was going to get him to play nice with him or something. Like he wasn't going to end up lined up against the wall. Oh, you fool.
Yep.
Oh,
it's the John McCain syndrome.
It is.
It is.
We should just call it the McCain syndrome.
Exactly. You brought up Cheryl Atkinson, and that is a great example. So here's somebody. So I've had her on a number of times over the years. First time I had her on, if you'd ever listen to my show on Blog Talk, when I come out of a commercial, it's always where it's okay. I get somebody like Ted Nugent to say where it's okay to be a conservative. And I think she heard that, and I think it was like she went out of her way several times in that very first interview to explain to me that she's not I'm not on either side. I'm not on either side. And I would say, and I'm speculating here just based on the conversations I've had with her, I would speculate at that time she wasn't. I would say she was probably a Democrat.
Yeah.
But to your point, they put her in that box. And then and then there was nobody left to stand up for me. So I believe throughout the course of all these interviews over the years, I believe she is now a conservative, maybe a moderate one, but she's a conservative because they put her in that box. They persecuted her and nobody would stand up. She was an award-winning journalist. Nobody would come to her defense. They kept attacking her, trying to destroy her life. And I believe they drove her to be a conservative, because I can tell you the last few times I had her on, she had no problem with or it's okay to be a conservative. So,
well, I'll tell you what, there's a lot of people like that. I think, Glenn Greenwald, I wouldn't call him a conservative, but I mean, he's what, a Russian agent because he wants the truth. By the way, will the press care when they come for John Solomon? Because that's what they wanted at. Apparently, the FBI is very interested in Rudy's communications with a journalist. John Solomon. Why? Because John Solomon busted the Russia collusion hoax wide open. It was a hoax. And in case you weren't watching, John Solomon tried to put it in front of you. All right, so I wonder how many people will care about the threat to press freedoms when they go after somebody like John Solomon, because that probably is coming. I hate to say it, but that's what it sounds like to me. And, as far as, Cheryl Atkinson and others, you have, Glenn Greenwald, certainly not a conservative. I mean, people like independent journalists like Tim Pool, he's not a conservative, but they pushed him into the arms. Joe Rogan, Dave Rubin, they're pushing people, what we used to think were just fair-minded people who disagreed with, like that's it, fair-minded, right? What would you call them? It turns out if you're not a rabid ideologue, then you may end up being, ostracized. Marginalized is a better word, actually. They marginalize these folks, man. And I wouldn't, like Cheryl, I would never have thought, somebody like a Tim Pool would say, I'm voting for Donald Trump because these people are nuts. Like, because if you can see beyond it, it's not a matter of who you're voting for and who not, but you have to, at some point, you have to, that's the side you're on if that's what you're condoning. And I just never thought we'd be in a place, because I grew up at the time I grew up, the left hated this stuff. They hated it. And I was like all alone, fighting, the Patriot Act's a bad idea. This is not a good idea. Going back all those years. And the left was an ally. Where the hell are they now? I mean, really? This is where we're at? 20 years, I guess, does a lot to the hive mind on college campuses, man.
The real danger here is this. Okay, so you've got to be a hardcore ideologue. You have to be on board with everything if you're on the left. There's things as a conservative. There's things that I'm not either that passionate about, or I find disagreements with the party. From time to time I say, I don't know if that's really a good idea. You can't do that on the left. You're done. You are toast. But here's the real danger, and the really scary part of it is it can change like that. They can change those rules in a second. I'll give you one example real quick. Look at the Betsy Ross flag, which was behind President Obama in his second inauguration. They had all kinds of Betsy Ross flags. And all it took one tweet from Colin Kaepernick. One tweet from Colin Kaepernick, and everybody always knew the Betsy Ross flag was a symbol of racism. And well, no, they didn't. Look at Barack Obama. Look behind what's that behind him in his inauguration. But the fact that it's already a fact, just because of one tweet, 1 minute later, everybody always knew it was a racist symbol. So it changes so quickly. And this is, I think, what Bill Maher is concerned about when he talks about the cancel culture, because he's like
steamrolled.
I can't, maybe I just didn't keep up with him. Maybe I didn't wake up this morning and first thing look at all the tweets, and I might have missed something. And then I say something and bam, I'm done, because everybody always knew that you don't say that, or, and that's the really scary part about it. And I feel sorry for just the average American that's on the left, because you almost better not say anything, because maybe you missed a tweet.
And you're done. Mm-hmm. With that, we're a little over, Don. I don't know what you got going on, but I was going to take, I told Laura to grab 3 questions. Can you hang tight?
I can.
All right, let's. It's 1:12. So let's try to get a few in here. It wasn't a traditional Freewheeling Friday. We had Matt on, right? So normally I would kind of answer questions along the way, and that didn't happen this time. But that's all right. That's all right.
It's okay. He shall feel my wrath later.
He shall feel my wrath.
So Nathan wants to know, Rich mentioned getting a fingerprint verification. Is that constitutional? Also, is it politically viable?
Yeah, so I look, I'm not a lawyer, Nathan, but I do think it's constitutional because we have other rights that are not privileges, right? I mean, having the right to bear arms is not a privilege, it's a right, and yet still you're required to go through a process to verify who you are and that you're not a criminal. So, I mean, that would be the argument I would make, but also there's just a ton of when you're born, you have to have a print. So it's already on. There's already some record of you being you, and so I don't know, Don. I mean, look, if you can put your finger on an iPhone, if you can put your finger on the MacBook, if you can put your finger on the iMac, if you got to give your finger to get a job, if it's certain kinds of jobs, if you got to put your finger on the paper to get a gun, for the sake of us all, and to take away not only accountability, we have to remove the human factor. If you want to make sure that there really is not going to be anything, any breaches of election integrity, then you cannot leave it in the hands of people. People are corruptible. So, with that, it's a finger. The finger doesn't match, it doesn't match. It's that simple,
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And also not a lawyer, but I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night. So,
That's
like
old
you,
school.
like you, the first thing I thought of was, the birth certificate, and so I think we've got to do something about the integrity. But I've also, for me, we got to do something about the integrity. You've got to be who you say you are, but also, you get concerned about how much information am I giving out now. Now everybody's got a fingerprint on file, so I get both sides of the argument, but
I do.
I'm gonna come down on the side of we need we just saw it. We need election integrity, so that is one way to do it, and I would do that to vote. I would put my finger on the thing, and so
100%. And again, I just say that it's already really out there. I'm not suggesting we give a DNA strand. Like, you're talking to somebody who I know where I'm from. I don't give a damn about ancestry.com or whatever they're called. I'm not giving them my DNA. The US military has my DNA. If you want, if you want it, you can ask them for it, and they're going to tell you to stick it, and that's it, right? So I'm not that's it. I'm not ending up in some genome project or some, that's just not me. So I get that. I completely get that argument. But fingerprints are a little bit, that's different. They're already there. I mean, it's a done deal.
If you have a passport, it's there.
Yeah, you got a passport. I mean, you got, right? I mean, all of that. So for this, if we can do it for all of that, and in fact, without volunteering it in many cases, then we can do it to secure our election. It's almost like the argument, if you need an ID to buy a beer, then you need an ID to vote. Well, if you need a fingerprint to buy a gun, you need a fingerprint to vote. I mean, that's where I'm at on this. That's a great question, though, Nathan. Great question.
That, you're too dumb to scan your finger.
Yeah, unless they think certain minorities don't know how to put. Well, which finger? Where do I put it? Right, Mark Elias? I mean, come on, man. That'll be next.
They'd end up putting their toes on it. It's like, no, your finger.
But that's, that.
Yes, the stupidity of it.
Don't ever put anything above any of these people, ever. You will be let down. You will be let down. Trust me. I've had 20 years of this now, almost, damn it. They let me down every time. And they never pass up a chance to let me down. Right?
Right.
Go ahead, Laura. What do you got?
Sandy Paws would like to know, I do have to wonder, given all this abuse, how do these institutions expect to stick around if a populist gets into power?
Well, Don, I don't know. You want to take that one first?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think everything right now is so crazy. We had President Trump in there, and I was kind of hoping for the drain the swamp thing. I think he did what he could. I think he really didn't understand how deep it was. And when I talk about that, I'm talking about people like the Mitch McConnells, right? So I mean, I think he expected to come in and be able to have his support and some others, and he had it from time to time. When it came to federal judges, that's about the only thing Mitch was really helpful on. So I don't know. I mean, I think right now there's so much trust lost with some of these agencies. and things that are going on in government. I think the swamp, I think we all were exposed to how deep the swamp really is. So I don't know what it takes to fix it. And I wish I had an answer for that. It's a great question. But I really don't.
Yeah, I think that it would take a machine, like a populist machine. After Donald Trump was elected, and Sandy, that's a great question. After Donald Trump was elected, not that I was trying to kill all, everyone's celebration of people who were happy he was elected, but I tweeted out something and got violent reactions to, which was the election of one man a revolution does not make. And that if he did not have the institutional support, which is something Robert and I talk about all the time. Look at what Jackson, he learned. He said, you know what? You cannot trust these elitist pieces of garbage. You need to build this up yourself. They'll sabotage you. No one man, no matter what office it is, has the power if they don't have the institutional support. And Donald Trump got elected a little bit like too soon. He didn't build a movement first. He didn't fill Democrats. We're very smart at this. Create a huge bureaucracy, a huge labor force that's totally relying on you, and you'll have their loyalty. Republicans, populists, I don't know, whatever you want to call it, they don't have that. And I think it would take more of a movement than a single person, because I mean, and I hate to say this, but it doesn't, whether you're a Republican, a Democrat, an independent, or something else, one thing you should take away from Donald Trump's 4 years is that you really aren't in charge. And that if your country says, I want a different direction, I want change, right? Mm-hmm. That's tough crap unless you force that change over time. It turns out the hope and change mantras, Don, we've been hearing for years, are bogus. They're bogus from whether that comes from the Republican Party, it comes from the Democratic Party. They really are a uniparty in some respects, like Don is talking, Mitch McConnell. That's a perfect example. Him and Paul Ryan at the Mayflower, Don, a couple of days after inauguration, not even, it was like a day after, laughing about Donald Trump and building the wall. Laughing about it, then going up to the microphone or going on Fox News and lying, bald face lying about what they're going to support that president on. And then they're alone and they're like, stupid idiots, stupid middle America, we're never going to give that moron a vote on a wall, kind of. That is how they spoke behind your back. And
they this is an important thing, because our country was founded on just regular folks being, that's the we the people, so we talk a lot about term limits and all these different kinds of things, so you don't end up with career politicians. But that's one of the things that I think all of us have to understand. And I'm not just even talking about the left. In fact, I'll talk about it on the right. Mitch McConnell, Paul Ryan, another great example, Mitt Romney, John McCain. These are powerful people in powerful positions that look at Donald Trump like they look at the rest of us. We're the little people. We're the little rubes down there. And we're just too stupid to really understand what they're saying. And that's how they justify their own life and the things that they do. So those people hated Donald Trump winning as much as anybody on the left did. So don't ever forget that these people do not see you and me as equals. They see us as little rubes that should just shut up and run along and keep our mouths shut. That's why they hate what we're doing here right now.
Yeah, and their friends across the aisle have more in common with them than they do with you. All right, now look at perfect example. Liz Cheney a little bit earlier tweeted how, I don't care how much I disagree with him. I will be this, be this nice and put this face on. And the president's look. That's all very well and good. So here she is attacking conservatives for not liking Joe Biden and not feeling like they have to be respectful to Joe Biden after 4 years of their president being disrespected. And instead of turning her attention, like all the things we just spoke about, here you have the man weaponizing the Department of Justice and God knows what other agency again against his political opponents, who, by the way, are supposed to be her voters. Right? Weaponizing powerful government agencies against his political opposition, who happen to live in Wyoming and in the rest of the middle America, and she is more concerned about how they feel about him. It's just incredible. And the same thing goes the relationship we talked about the other day. The Bushes. And
one thing that happened in that speech that I want to point out, and it kind of makes the point that you were just talking about here. They use people like Liz Cheney, and she's like, great. She's just like, it's the John McCain thing.
Happy to be used.
Yep. Well, even John McCain.
Keep sending me my war
crazy.
money. That's all.
Yeah, exactly. Joe Biden, one of the things he said on there when he was justifying his high tax rates after corporate tax rates, after he just asked, give me one good reason they make these things in Beijing. That's it. But anyway, when he did that, what did he say? He said, I'm only returning the tax rate back to what it was with George W. Bush.
Right.
Now, you'll notice
which he opposed, by the way.
Correct. What he was saying, though, was that was what George W. Bush took over from Bill Clinton. Those were Bill Clinton's tax rates. But this is what they do. So they're going to love Liz Cheney going forward. She's going to be all over TV, and you're always going to hear it prefaced with Liz Cheney, who's no liberal, says, but Joe Biden did that in that speech. He said, this was what we're just turning him back to the George W. Bush. I think he kind of slipped up when he said at the beginning, for like the first 5 days, because he couldn't change him before he got inaugurated. But that's what they do. They put it on to Republicans. We didn't set it at that level. That was the Clinton administration that did that.
Right.
But he left that part of it out and made it about George Bush. So even George Bush thought that was a great tax rate, which he did.
Right. Absolutely. What a great point. What a great point. All right. What's the third and final one here, Laura?
All right. Your third and final question comes from Max L. I keep asking this question, but is freedom of the press misinterpreted? There's no way the Constitution sanctions liberal media monopolies.
Wow, what a great question. Look, first, let me just kick this open for discussion, Don. I mean, the history of media in this country, I think, would surprise people quite a bit. And I am talking about the government treatment of them. John Adams would throw you in jail. So would Abraham Lincoln. There's a difference between being able to speak your mind and to cover authority. Then there's a difference between that and, essentially, Don, subverting, all right, and subversion. And even, more so, back then it was a little bit different. It was understood that it was like party media instead of, I don't know how to explain this, but the New York Post, it's conservative now or leans right now. It actually derived from a paper that leaned left in the beginning. It was a Federalist paper. And that flipped with the New York Times. It started as a Jefferson Republican supporting paper. And now it's all for statism. So I think people, Don, that's even beyond the issue of monopoly. That brings a whole new dynamic into this conversation, which is that should they be allowed? Should these 5 corporations be allowed to control information? Because that's what they're trying to do. It's a monopoly on information. After 2016, they concluded, rightfully so, that they lost control of the narrative because they lost control of information. You famously play that clip of Mika Brzezinski. She said it. She just blabbed it. It was exactly 100%. We can't have people like Donald Trump talking directly to the American people. It has to go through our filter. She blatantly put it that way. What do you think about this?
Okay, so it's almost like you're going to think this question was a plant,
right?
Something in the works. And the reason is we did another. Just so you know, we did another one here 2 days ago, and it was with my good friend Dave Perkins. So if you know that name, Dave was he was with the Blaze. He was a news editor, news guy, anchor with those guys, but he's several years radio show, nationally syndicated. He's an amazing guy. He's a walking encyclopedia. The guy's as smart as anybody I've ever met. We did a Just So You Know, and that's exactly what we did it on. What was meant by the word press in our First Amendment. And I'll just, so the video's on there. If you go to my locals thing, you can find the video. It's on my YouTube, but it'll be part of the show tomorrow as well. Dave, he gets all this stuff. So you got to understand this, and I'll just make it quick. But
did he get into the taxes on stuff like that? I mean, go back even to the colonies. It's like he went all different view. Yeah.
This guy's a walking encyclopedia, so he covers the whole thing. But just to make it real brief, because that's a great question. People think when they say freedom of the press that they're talking about the press, the media, the journalists. There was none of that. There was none of that back in the day.
Right.
What press means is the freedom of the printing press.
Literally, quite literally tried to tax them out of existence because they didn't want objective or counter arguments to you know, it was like everyday people could afford only certain kind of materials, and you know, to be able to print out on certain kind of paper they had to, because people can only pay so much to be able to read the pamphlet, right? They're not talking about a corporation, a journalistic corporation. This is simply not what they're talking about. They're talking about the ability to have materials to be able to articulate your views.
Yeah, the newspapers. So I mean, you think about it. Way back in the day, the newspaper you read was printed very close by. You weren't reading the, you know,
That's
nobody
right.
was. You weren't reading the New York paper in L.A. You know,
That's right.
Well, obviously back then, but so. What they were talking about was the local thing. So if you were a politician, you had two choices. You could be at literally a town hall where you're yelling to people
On
as
the
loud
corner
as,
or something.
and they can only hear you so far, or you had your local newspaper. Freedom of the press means that you couldn't control I'm only going to let this guy get his political ads in the newspaper, and I'm just going to block that guy out. That's what was meant by it. But Dave does such a great job of explaining it. Again, just go into my locals thing. And
Yeah,
the
I can't
video's
wait to
already
watch
there.
that. I'll check that out. I can't
Really
wait to
cool.
watch that, because it really is dead on. I mean, guys, that stuff didn't exist back then. It simply did not exist. What the British government was trying to do was, you know, make it too unaffordable to be able to get your word out. I mean, really, that's what it was. You know, the difference too, Don, is that they didn't pretend that they were like some objective source of information. The idea was, this is an argument. We want to debate each other. We want to deliberate over the best possible policy position, or what is best for society, what is best for the system of government, whatever it may have been. It was no fake presenting to the people some kind of objective standard of news, which wasn't. I mean, that's not what they were doing. Did they have regular things? Well, this is what happened today. Yeah, but it was almost always slanted. Like, today, Jefferson signed this. That stupid idiot doesn't realize we need a strong federal government. I mean, read them, guys. Read them. They're primary sources everywhere. It's very different. It's not Glenn Kessler pretending to be the arbiter of truth. He had a point of view. The readers knew he had a point of view, and they were reading it in good faith to consume someone else's viewpoint and to deliberate over it, to debate over it. Very different. It was called the Age of Reason for a reason. Okay?
Exactly.
I mean, all of this came out of that for a reason. We're not reasonable people anymore. I mean, it's just true.
Exactly.
We want to believe this is sound.
You know, but the whole thing with the press is, once then it did exist, and there were journalists, and there were people, you know, investigative reporting, and there was TV, and there was all this kind of stuff. At some point in there, they took that and they said, "Oh, this is our protection." It had nothing to do with them. It was not written to protect people who going around doing. It was about the printing press. But look at how they took that, and now everybody just thinks, well, you know, they're talking about journalists, so it's, but it's not. So
which is why what started under Barack Obama, you know, and it can, you know, hate to tell everybody who supported Donald Trump, but it continued under Donald Trump at the FBI and other places. You know, look what happened with Julian Assange. It really ramped up under Barack Obama, but they took this. Don is right. They want this to be their right. This is their privilege, and that is not what this started as. And that's how they could get somebody like a Julian Assange. They choose not to do their job, not to cover certain things about Hillary Clinton, not to cover certain things about the DNC. They don't want to tell you about the incestuous relationship that exists between their corporations and the Democratic Party, and even some of the Republican Party. Like, every time Mitch McConnell wants to hurt a conservative, he runs to Politico. They know that they have an agreement over there, you know, and that's been a long-standing agreement with Boehner and other members of the establishment Republicans. But they want to take that away. So here, somebody like Julian Assange steps up and says, you know, that's my right too, and I can do that too, whoever it may be, Andrew Breitbart, whatever, right? And you're not doing the job, I have the right to do it too. I am now a journalist, and I deserve press freedom as well. Oh no. oh no, you're not their journalist. This right is for them. And when you allow that fundamental misunderstanding of that entire amendment or section of the First Amendment, then it's all right. And people really, you see stupid stuff on Twitter like Julian Assange isn't a real journalist and didn't have the right to publish that stuff. I mean, it's crazy. And really what happened, I mean, Don, his first sin was exposing to the world that we killed that Reuters journalist. That was his first sin. The military lied, the Obama administration lied. As it turns out, we vaporized that poor bastard.
The bottom line is there is no such thing anymore as it being about, no issue is about what they say it's about. Feminism is not about feminism. Racism is not about racism. Look at the Tim Scott, Uncle Tim. All these things that they say are about the thing are not. It's an ideological test. Look at Caitlyn Jenner coming out last week and announcing, look at the hate. Look at the just boom from the LGBTQ community.
Yeah.
So none of these things are what they are about. They're about your ideology. So Tim Scott is the wrong kind of Black American, and it goes on and on and on. So to your point about the journalism, same thing applies there. You're the wrong kind. Cheryl Atkinson was the perfect kind. She was an award-winning journalist.
Absolutely.
Until she went against the grain and said something bad about Hillary, which is verboten. So now all of a sudden she was the wrong kind. So then she got the hassling and the boom. And as I said earlier, I think even drove her to conservatism.
And you decides to investigate Fast and Furious. I think maybe the Obama administration is lying about this. What is that? That's justification for them to spy on her and start going through her laptop. I mean, folks, I'm telling you, party, no party. You better wake the hell up here. This is the hour is late, my friend. The hour is late.
Yep. I got to say this because you brought up Fast and Furious, and I'm going to dig this thing up. There was a video, and I don't know if anybody knows this. So you remember at the time when they were trying to say that, this was just a carry on from George Bush, and
right? Yes.
There was a video out there, and this also
lie.
speaks to censorship as well. There's a video out there that they took themselves. It was the Obama administration, and it's all of them there. Napolitano, Eric Holder's there. The whole gang is all there. Robert Gibbs. And they're all congratulating themselves for this great idea, and they're detailing the whole project, the whole Fast and Furious project. And they're saying whose idea it was. This was approved by the president, This is like a 60-minute video. It's like an hour-long video. And it has been removed over and over and over again. Every time somebody puts it on YouTube, they take it off. Oops, I shouldn't have said that. They take it off. I put it on a hard drive, and I'm going to pull that thing out, and I'm going to put parts of that in my show just to show you that while they were saying this was George W. Bush's thing and he started it, here they are bragging about creating this new and how much better it was going to be than what the last guys did. So I've got it all on an external hard drive. I'm going to pull that thing out and pull some clips out and show you exactly what happened. But that's the level of deceit they go to. And then everybody gets on board with it and they take it off and they remove it. And every time somebody puts it on, that's gone, that's gone. Look at the things that disappear that are on social media. That are you can't find them anymore. That anti-racism one, that's another example of that because they keep pulling it down every time somebody puts it on there.
Google too, their searches have changed so dramatically. If it wasn't for Project Veritas, who just got banned from Twitter, we would not know about what they did to People's Pundit Daily after the 2016 election. A whistleblower came forward and, look, they are absolutely blacklisting this website. Our crime, showing you that there was another election model. That was our crime. That was more accurate than their favorite, which I'm not going to, he who shall not be named here. Yeah, but we were a challenge to his narrative, and that's why he gets paid what he gets paid, and his business is failing. It doesn't matter. There's always someone who's going to reach in their pocket to fund it because his job is not election projection. His job is election narrative creation. That is his job. That's his role. And anyone like me who steps out of bounds, like, whoa, let's talk about predictive indicators, then that's a problem. So they put us on a list. And, that's really what... Well, it was a hell of a show today, I got to tell you. It's 1:37, Don. We're going to be back tomorrow. Tell everybody where they can find you, what you got coming up. Of course, I'll be on.
Absolutely. Yeah. Love to. Got a great show tomorrow. So put a lot of stuff in this week and did some great interviews. Of course, Rich will be there live as well. But I'm in my community is Don Smith Show. You can find me there. Of course, my website, donsmithshow.com. Always have the links on there. And everybody, I did figure it out. So I know how to get the link in there where you go to the right place as you're waiting for the show to start. I finally figured it out. So I love this more than Blog Talk because I can actually.
It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress. You know, things get bumpy. Happened with us too last week. We had troubles, man.
But when there were problems on Blog Talk, I had no control and there was nothing I could do because it wasn't on my end. At least now it's all on me. So I got to figure it out. I like that better, though. I like having the control of that. But we've got.
You live and learn. You live and learn. You know, I think this week we came back better than ever, honestly. Right? Pound. Serious. Yep. You know? We
got Dave Perkins on tomorrow. We've got Dr. Cordy Williams. Amazing guy, 1776 Forever Free, just an incredible guy. You'll love that interview. I just interviewed before I came on here my good friend Quan Nguyen, who is now a state representative in D1 in Arizona. Amazing guy. This guy he is the American dream, and I think you'll love that interview as well. Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of great stuff going on, a lot of great interviews tomorrow, and we've got a lot of good news to cover, and really looking forward to the show tomorrow. So everybody join me, donsmithshow.com. Obviously, local's best place, Don Smith Show community, and look forward to talking to you tomorrow as well, my friend.
Yeah, and just so you know, check out Just So You Know, because that was good stuff. Yeah, and, you know, as always, Don, we love having you on. Thanks for staying a little bit longer today, you know. I hope everyone enjoyed. You know what? Out of today, I hope everybody got a little bit of something positive. You know, both major segments were positive, even though most of the news cycle, unfortunately, is not just downright terrifying. In some instances, just downright terrifying. At least today we offered a little bit of, like you said, there are reasons to be optimistic. Now, I'm not talking about party. I'm talking about the state of our nation, folks. You know, there are reasons to be optimistic. You just don't have to take it lying down. Is the moral of the story today? You don't have to take it lying down. All right. And I'm a pollster. I'm an American first. You know, I mean, we all, at some point, you're an FBI agent, you're an American first. So marinate on that the next time you execute an illegal search warrant, right? I mean, all the way down the line, that has to be a message, and it really shouldn't matter who's in power at what time. But yeah, looking forward to tomorrow. And like I said, I think we came back a little bit bigger and better today than ever. You know, and it'll just keep getting better with time. It always does. But thanks again, my friend. I'm gonna use Highway to take us out of here, and I'll see you tomorrow at noon.
Highway.
See you there.
And that's Don Smith, folks. As always, good conversation with Don. Happy he hung around for the Q&A, you know, to take us out of here. Yeah, I said Highway. I meant Bad Habit. Of course, everyone's favorite half-dirty song, right? That's not quite, but we all know what we're saying, right? But it's not bad. It's got to be censored. Yeah, it's the best kind. Honestly, it's the best kind. It's like the old school way of doing things. Now listen, if you enjoyed the video today, do not forget to subscribe on YouTube. Of course, that is always a big help. Like the video, and if you don't like it, then dislike it. But you know, sign up to the locals page, peoplespundit.locals.com. This weekend, I'm gonna see. We'll pick something. We'll pick something extra. We'll keep it a small survey, but we'll pick something extra to throw in there with Biden's approval, right track, wrong track. You know, the typical indicators. We'll have a conversation on locals this weekend about what we're gonna do here. All right. So, and then that will be different from the late spring public polling project. I just want to stress that. Okay. That'll be totally different. Which you can, by the way, support at Big Data Poll /public polling project. BigDataPoll.com, BigDataPoll.com /public polling project. See you on locals, peoplespundit.locals.com. I'm taking us out. This is a special thanks to the Bowen Band for the theme song, as always. All right, it's not Highway. Highway is what are the odds? It's Bad Habit. Have a good weekend, folks. See you tomorrow.
How much you wanna bet that I can get you back inside your head before the summer ends and spread a little love. Just for a little fun, I'll make you every son. Baby, it's meant to be. I know you got a man, but he don't understand. You're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. Rhythm in our love, it's impressive, excessive. You can't make this stuff up. My chest beats, it's restless, wakes the neighbors up above. Yeah, baby, come and show me love. Baby, come and show me love. Because you're gonna be a heartbreaker. You're such a love taker. So just suck me in and you can toss me like a cigarette. 'Cause I just wanna be a bad habit, yeah. We can get on a plane and take a one-way ride. Steal us away to find a place we can hide. It wouldn't take much to disappear for a night. Just to give in to the need and leave it all behind. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. 'Cause I know that you know that I know that you want me. You told me, now show me, come blow me away. You're gonna be a heartbreaker.